Chapter 31. Fight, win, enjoy one. Kook. Arg. Everyone stood quietly in shock as the amputated cadets' groans echoed in the training ground. The other cadets just couldn't believe what they were witnessing, that they doubted their eyes and ears. Arg. What do you think you're doing? Stop wasting time. Go call the medical team. The Tana twins raised their voices, although it was one step too late. Jean was still standing before them with an indifferent look. Jean, you bastard! Did you lose your mind? Why did you swing your sword without warning? Although the twins objected to Jin's actions, their eyes were trembling in anxiety. Did he already notice that we borrowed our elder sister's lackeys? But how could he pinpoint them so accurately and cut one's arm? All the twins could think of right now was dealing with this problem no matter what. Otherwise, they'd have to handle two catastrophes. Firstly, they had let one of their elder sister's lackeys get injured on their very first day. At this rate, their sisters would reprimand them to death. Secondly, if they didn't avenge the cadet immediately and acted against Jean, their dignity would hit rock bottom. The news that the Tana twins had been humiliated by their youngest brother in front of all the other intermediate cadets would instantly spread within the clan. Shivers ran down their spine as they stared at the composed Jean in the eyes, but they couldn't allow themselves to shrink back in fear. How would they explain themselves to their sisters? We're terribly sorry. We were terrified of the youngest even though we had your lackeys with us. As if they could say something like that. Charity. In the end, the Tana twins unsheathed their swords simultaneously. I'll kill you. That's it. Stop trying to crawl your way up the ranks. You. Jean completely ignored the Tana twins and turned to the cadet holding his bloody arm. The cadet raised his head and stared at Jean. What is your name? Jean Ramello. Do you know why I cut your arm? Ugh, I do not. Why did you do such a thing? Hey Jean, are you ignoring us? Unsheath your weapon again. Bastard. It's time we brought this conflict to an end. Elder brothers. Jean slightly tilted his head to make eye contact with the twins. I am talking with Jean right now. What was that? Please be quiet. If you wish to battle me, I will indulge on a later date. How dare you? After attacking our cadet. Your cadet. Haytona almost instinctively blocked his own mouth with his hand. Was this individual a part of your clique? I only slashed him as he was directing killing intent towards me. Silence descended upon the training ground once again. The Tana twins could only stare in astonishment with their mouths and eyes wide open. They were planning on confronting Jean, but got wrapped up in his pace. With the exchange just now, Jean Ramello was established as part of the Tana twins faction. In other words, Jin's actions just now weren't a simple rebellious outbreak, but rather a part of a long-lasting tradition within the Runcandle clan. It was a part of their battle for dominance. The Runcandle's familial conflict was always a source of inspiration for traveling bards and minstrels. It was also great gossip material for drunk customers in bars. In general, there were no stories more exhilarating than the story of siblings having a bloody battle to trample on each other. The medical team has arrived. As a yell resounded from behind the rank of cadets, the crowd split in half to create a passage. The medical team behaved as usual, unlike the Tana twins or the other cadets. They had gotten used to seeing blood and wounds on a daily basis in the clan. Due to the medical team's natural movements as they settled around Jean, the twins also had to get out of their way. Although they were pure-blooded Runcandles, they still couldn't disturb an emergency medical operation. Listen carefully, Jean. That also goes for all the cadets here. Jean suddenly cried out as he lifted his head. I am Jean Runcandle. From now on, I do not mind if any of you behave like I just did towards Jean. You can surprise attack me with your swords, or strike me from behind when I've let my guard down. The dumbfounded cadets stared at Jean with mouths agape. But keep this in mind. If I sense anyone directing even the slightest amount of murderous intent towards me, I will not hesitate to cut you down as well. Just like what I did moments ago. After saying what he had to say, Jean casually returned to his original position. The cadets in the area could only gulp as Jean passed by them. He had caused such chaos, even as Zed Runcandle watched him with wide eyes from the stage. However, Jean didn't even bother apologizing to Zed. The boy knew that, according to the Zed he knew, his uncle would praise him instead of punishing him. He loves familial conflict and bold people more than anyone else in this clan. More than father, in fact. The medical team left the training ground with Kajin on a stretcher. The cadets all watched with impatience to see how Zed would penalize Jean. They all expected the boy to be reproached by the instructor. The Tana twins especially hoped that their uncle would severely punish their brother. Jean Runcandle, the patriarch's 13th child. Yes, elder. Jean didn't call him uncle on purpose. His father and uncle were similar. It seemed that the elders of the clan all preferred to be shown respect according to their ranks. You've done something quite dreadful. You dare do such a thing in my presence. Color returned to the Tana twins' faces as they stood frozen. Zed Runcandle, their awe-inspiring uncle. Zed's thunderous roars could make anyone shrink back in fear, even their monstrous younger brother. That is correct. How insolent. Why did you do so? I didn't challenge my brothers just now. I was challenging you, elder. Not only had he cut Kajin, Jean also made an offensive remark. At this point, even the Tana twins could only hold their breath in shock, despite their wish to see Jean getting demolished. Did he actually lose his mind? Goodness, how can he act like this? The twins were having the same thoughts as the other cadets. You? Challenging me? What a very, very interesting story. What made you do that? SSSSSSSSSS. A white sword took shape in Zed's hand. Forming a sword of pure aura was something that only outstanding 8-star knights could do. Speak. Depending on your answer, I may cut your head off immediately. Despite the fact that I was amongst the new cadets, you organized a special intermediate class welcoming ceremony. I perceived that as a challenge and attack from you, elder. Swoosh. Slit. Zed lightly swung his sword and a small gash appeared on Jin's left cheek. But the boy stood still and waited for a reply from his uncle. So you were offended by the ceremony I organized and caused all this confusion and chaos? You thought I was challenging and attacking you. While I was not offended, that is exactly it. In that case, why did you attack a cadet instead of me? Because I cannot win against the elder yet. Had I had a real chance of winning, I would have slashed you instead of Kajin or my brother's elder. You don't seem to care about your life. Or maybe you trust your position as the patriarch's son too much. Just because my opponent is stronger than me does not mean I should sit back and get abused by them. I merely believe such thoughts aren't a part of the Runcandle's virtues and standards. The legs of the cadets nearby were on the brink of trembling. They had no idea on what basis this 15-year-old rookie could stand his ground and run his mouth as such. Zed only spoke again after thinking to himself for a few minutes. So you mean that one's life may only be temporary, but one's honor lasts forever? How foolish. The sword-shaped aura on his hand dispersed and scattered away. But this uncle of yours quite likes your foolish audacity. Good, I shall admit it. You are worthy of surviving amongst the Runcandles. Kuhahaha. Zed suddenly burst out in laughter. Remember this day, cadets. Today you have witnessed the very essence of the Runcandles. This rookie's attitude is the core of our identities as Swordmasters. Yes. Every day is a battle. You are dismissed. Daytona and Haytona will stay behind. The rest of you may return. Training starts tomorrow. The cadets began to exit the training ground in an orderly fashion. The Tana twins felt like their blood was being drained from their bodies. As Jean passed by them, he spoke. As your little brother, I'd like to give you some advice. The twins turned their heads to face him with blank expressions. Always think about the future. You may be more afraid of our older siblings than me right now, but that may change later on. Don't you think so? The Tana twins couldn't even answer Jean as he smiled gently. Whoa, I gotta say, his drive and willpower were amazing. Were we dreaming just now? I still can't believe that happened. Do you think the rumors that he killed the White Wolf warrior are true? Putting how we could join his faction aside, we definitely shouldn't have him as an enemy. But he's still the 13th amongst the 13 Runcandle children. We don't want to ruin our entire lives by joining the wrong faction. The other Runcandles are all already distinguished. That's not wrong, but still he was quite the sight to behold. Just who would ever be brave enough to act like that in front of Elder Zed? And have you heard? They say that young Master Jean may one day be the successor of the clan. It's an open secret that the Patriarch has been dissatisfied by Lord Joshua. So, shush, what if someone hears us? You're gonna get us all in trouble. The recent incident in the intermediate training class immediately spread amongst the cadets. Every single intermediate cadet in the dormitory was talking about Jin's behavior today. Meanwhile, Scott, Mesa, Bellup, and the other cadets who had advanced with Jean this year were already being called the youngest division. In other words, they were the object of their seniors' sharp and pressuring gazes. The new intermediate cadets were moving around in groups at all times, just as Jean had told them to. Since young Master Jean cut Kajin's arm, they may retaliate to get revenge within the day. Keep an eye on your surroundings at all times and stay sharp. Mesa, the unofficial leader of the group, gave out orders to the rest of them. And around an hour later, a group of intermediate cadets came to the room where the youngest division was gathered. The youngest division members exchanged nervous gazes and took their stances as one of them carefully opened the door. Just like what young Master Jean had done in class today, they were prepared to swing their fists as soon as they detected the slightest bit of murderous intent. Nice to meet you, juniors. However, the intermediate cadets standing before the door were holding cigarettes, alcohol, and all kinds of food and snacks. It was as if an enemy nation had sent an ambassador in order to build a friendly relationship between the two countries. The youngest division was in shock and couldn't help but receive the basket of food with blank expressions. In truth, after experiencing the welcoming ceremony earlier today, the newbies were extremely nervous about the chaos and violence that would ensue in their dormitories. They weren't afraid of being beaten by their seniors. In fact, they couldn't care less about themselves. Instead, they were worried that if they got beaten down by their seniors every day, it would sully young Master Jin's dignity and reputation. We didn't know what you like, so we just got a bunch of different stuff. The cigarettes were made in Milla, and the alcohol is from a famous brand in the Curano dukedom. They were expensive, you know? We didn't put poison or anything in them, so we'd be grateful if you accepted these. Why are you suddenly giving us such things? Why, you ask? Because we're currying favor with you. We're not affiliated with any faction, so while we can't participate in the family dispute, we do want to root for young Master Jean. In the Runcandle clan, being unaffiliated to any faction meant that the cadets were not skilled enough. And despite being in this non-committal situation, these cadets had come looking for the youngest division because of the Tawna twins. These cadets had experienced all kinds of torment and bullying ever since the Tawna twins had advanced to the intermediate class 1 year ago. Therefore, they wanted to express their gratitude to Jean. The Tawna twins only behaved like obedient sheep in front of Jean or other Runcandle children, but most of the time, they were tyrannical madmen. They weren't known as the nefarious homicidal maniacs for nothing in Jin's first life. Well then, we'll be going. I hope that your future is brighter and more promising than ours. Chapter 32. Fight, win, enjoy too. Phew. Having returned to his room, Jean let out a long sigh. He shut the door and leaned against the wall as the tension left him. In fact, he was glad he could finally express his stress and nervousness ever since the beginning of class. Sheesh. I thought my heart would explode. As he recalled his conversation with his uncle, Zed Runcandle, Jean could only stare at the ceiling in astonishment. Thanks to his regression, Jean was aware of his uncle's personality and thought process, so he knew what to say exactly to satisfy the instructor. However, knowing what to say and actually having to say it in front of his uncle were completely different problems. Had Jean shown even the slightest hint of fear on his expression before Zed, one of his limbs would have been sent flying immediately. In fact, his uncle might have even cleanly sliced Jin's head off like he had said. However, Jean had successfully resolved the situation. He had planted a powerful and intense image of himself inside Zed and the other cadets' minds. Moreover, Jean had already declared war on the Tana twins faction over the hegemony of the intermediate class. Although the benefits Jean received seemed far too little compared to how he had risked his life to confront Zed, the boy knew it was worth it. Jean knew better than anyone else that one could very easily lose their life in the Runcandle clan for the smallest of issues, and that one couldn't earn anything unless they used all their forces and strength. Fight, win, and enjoy the benefits. I'm sure that even if everyone were a regressor, they wouldn't be able to act and behave like me. The three great virtues of the Runcandle clan he once hated in his first life. The current Jean was closer than anyone else to attaining these virtues. Gilly. Yes, young master. I've officially declared war on the Tana elder brothers. But it seems that elder sisters and Enmu are secretly backing them. Gilly instantly froze. The hand that was wiping the teacup stopped dead in its tracks. She had been expecting Jean and the Tana twins to fight over the hegemony when the youngest boy advanced classes. It was an inevitable conflict as long as they were all standing inside the same enclosure called the intermediate class. However, Gilly hadn't expected the Tana twins to have a backer. Soon, her gaze darkened and deepened. Ladies and Enmu, are you certain? Yeah. Today, I cut down a cadet who was alongside elder brothers, and after looking into it, he was a part of elder sisters and Enmu's faction. In fact, there's no way the Tana elder brothers would already have a 5-star knight in their faction. Even if someone is a part of the Runcandle direct lineage, a knight of the clan won't be willing to subordinate themselves to someone weaker than them. However, the Tana twins were still only at the 3-star stage. Ha! I didn't expect them to already start trying to keep you in check, young master, since they're already active flag bearers. Mu and En were 7-star knights who had already fought on many battlefields. Due to their numerous contributions, they received the flag bearer qualification from the clan. Amongst Siren Runcandle's 13 children, only 4 had yet to become flag bearers. Jean, the Tana twins, and Siren's youngest daughter, Yona. Gilly fiddled with the dry tea towel with complicated feelings. It's actually good news that my elder sisters are trying to keep me in check already. It means that they're already concerned by me despite our age gap. Even so, it's unreasonable. You're only 15 years old, young master, and it's an unwritten rule that flag bearers should only fight between themselves and not get involved with their youngest siblings. Gilly bursted out in fury. It's fine. I just have to change things so that my elder sisters don't just feel concerned by me, but also fear me. Poof! The sunbathing cat lying next to the window suddenly turned around and transformed into a human. What's going on? What are you talking about? Let me in on it as well. Gilly explained the situation in simple terms to Murakan, who then sighed deeply. It's such a pity I can't reveal my identity yet. I could easily beat up 2 7-star knights with the flick of a finger. Why do your siblings obsess with trampling on you, even though you're the clan's only hope of defeating the Zipfels in the future? The clan's only hope of defeating the Zipfels in the future. Murakan's words were accurate. If Jean mastered Sodaret's power and stayed within the clan, the Runcandles could trample on the Zipfels and take over the world in the future. Currently, the Zipfels had the upper hand. If the Runcandles and Zipfels were to start an all-out war today, the clan of magicians would come out victorious in the end. But the Zipfel clan hadn't declared war on the Runcandles yet for 2 reasons. The conflict would cause irreparable damage to the Zipfels, and the existence of Siren Runcandle. However, there was one teensy-weensy, but ever so crucial little tiny detail the Zipfels weren't aware of. The god they were desperately yearning for, Sodaret, was currently contracted to Jean. Are your siblings acting like this because they don't know you're Sodaret's contractor? No, they just try to keep anyone who shows potential in check. In fact, if they knew I was Sodaret's contractor, they would have been 10 times more motivated to trample me down. It would have been a miracle if I survived till the age of 15. Even so, the clan is still as fucked up as it was 1,000 years ago. In fact, things might have been better back then. Your first patriarch was rude and insolent, but he still had compassion and heart. Then what do you plan on doing from now on, young master? I've got no reason to hesitate. I've already dealt my sisters a heavy blow. Not only did I cut down their strongest intermediate class subordinate on my first day, I also shifted his official affiliation to the Tana faction instead of my sisters. Jean explained the incident at the training ground to the other two in detail. Officially speaking, Kajin was not a member of and Muse faction anymore, as the Tana twins had called him, our cadet. I'm sure my elder brothers will get beaten to death by our sisters. They'll definitely come to the training ground tomorrow with bruised and swollen faces. It'll be hard for them to try to oppress me with their intermediate class subordinates now. If a king bestowed his strongest army to a general and the general returned after getting the entire army decimated, the king wouldn't give them a second chance. That was the situation between Mew and the Tana twins. And since they're already flag bearers, my elder sisters can't personally come to the intermediate class to beat me to death. In that case, there's just one last method they can use to attempt to oppress me. Gilly gasped as she realized what Jean was talking about. Through missions. That's right. They'll most likely manipulate the missions I receive with their authority as flag bearers. I'm sure they'll specifically choose to assign me disgustingly difficult missions and earnestly wait for me to die on duty or to return with a severe injury. I will try to discuss it with the ladies' nannies. I cannot let such a thing happen to you, young master. The kind and naive Gilly didn't know how to think in a cunning and sly manner. You mustn't, Gilly. If they find out, elder sisters will accuse me of trying to abuse my power and will take disciplinary action against me. And the supervision of missions is part of the flag bearer's jurisdiction, so if we have no real explanation, we cannot stop them from manipulating my schedule of missions. Shit. God fucking damn it. Apologies, young master. That came out on the spur of the moment. It's fine, strawberry pie. Murakan replied in Jin's stead. The boy also smiled gently and continued his words. But there's one thing my elder sisters aren't aware of. Most of the difficult missions are one-man tasks. But if I'm assigned one-man missions, I won't have to hold back and hide my true abilities. Don't you think? Unlike group missions, Jean would be able to use magic and spiritual power when carrying out solo missions. He could use magic, spiritual power, and the combat techniques written in the secret tomes of the various martial clans as long as there was no one around or he killed all the witnesses. So solo missions are actually a great opportunity for me. If my elder sisters send me on solo missions, I'd be infinitely grateful. It's suffocating having to limit myself with just swordsmanship. I'll just go on the missions, use my hidden abilities to wipe out my enemies, and gain some achievements. Achievements on missions. That was the absolute criterion the instructors used to evaluate the cadets in the intermediate class. There were cases where a cadet had excellent swordsmanship but fell behind on missions, and vice versa. Needless to say, the more important criterion was the missions. Moreover, solo missions with high difficulties were the best missions to carry out in order to gain the most points. Solo missions usually consisted of assassinations and espionage, so they were the most dangerous tasks. That's a great plan, kid. If you were to use all your hidden abilities, you should be able to rival the weaker advanced class cadets, young master. Murakan and Gilly were well aware of Jin's true combat capabilities. Since Jin's swordsmanship was developing at a quick pace, he would probably reach the 4-star stage before being sent on his first mission. And if one of the missions appears to be too difficult for you, I could accompany you to help out. Even if it's a solo mission, they should allow you to take a mere cat along. No. They would. But I need you to do something else for me. What is it? I'll tell you later. Since we've discussed the most important stuff, I should head over to Elder Sister Luna's training session now. Behave yourself while I'm gone and don't cause any problems. The intermediate class began its training in earnest. Compared to the beginner training class, there were no particular differences in the regimen other than the fact that the cadets used real swords and that the difficulty was higher. However, when the afternoon classes began, Jean and the Tana twins were led to a hidden area inside the training ground and were taught the run candle swordsmanship. This was a privilege only available to direct run candle descendants. Our clan's swordsmanship is, in simple terms, overpowering. is destructive and unwavering. The clan's personality and virtues are perfectly embodied in our swordsmanship. The three boys sitting cross-legged on the floor nodded in sync. The Tana twins' faces were bruised and swollen just as Jean had predicted. They had been pummeled and beaten by their sisters all night long. However, Zed didn't even bother asking why the twins were in such pitiable states. He didn't care. He already knew that the Tana twins didn't have great potential since before Jean joined the intermediate class. I never thought the day would ever come when I'd feel pity for the Tana twins. Still, they reap what they sow. They were crazy homicidal maniacs in Jin's past life and were growing up to become the same homicidal maniacs right now. However, the twins were treated as outstanding, genius kids in the outside world. Yet, they fell short in Zed's eyes, and their uncle couldn't care less about them now. Moreover, the twins had gotten humiliated by their little brother yesterday, so Zed couldn't be more displeased with them. However, it wasn't as if Zed held absolutely no sense of affection towards them. Do not confront the youngest until you two are strong enough. That is, if you wish to live long. That child isn't someone you two can rival. Yesterday, after telling the twins to stay behind after class, Zed warned Jin's older brothers as so. You three must already be aware, but our clan's swordsmanship doesn't have a single style or form. While we do have secret techniques and decisive killing moves, those are only taught once you become flag-bearers. The swordsmanship that is taught to the direct Runcandle descendants is a formless style of swordsmanship. It was different compared to the style taught to the cadets. There were no patterns, no footwork, and no real shape or form. This was the biggest difference between the Runcandle clan and other martial clans. Do you know why our clan's swordsmanship is formless? It is due to the special physical capabilities and sensory faculties that the Runcandle bloodline possesses. Correct. The Runcandle lineage possesses blessed bodies. We hold special sensory faculties towards our own bodies and the sword that no ordinary human could understand. No one else. Not a single person. Out of thousands or tens of thousands. The timing at which the bloodline's blessing blooms and the overall effect on one's talents were different for each individual. However, the blessing did indeed bloom in every single Runcandle since 1,000 years ago. No one was exempted from it. However, the bloodline's affinity with magic was incredibly low. Jean was an extremely rare exception to the rule amongst the Runcandles. Zed continued his words and finished his explanation. And so, what I'm about to teach you three is extremely simple and unsophisticated. Get up. Chapter 33. Fight. Win. Enjoy 3. Zed pointed next to the three kids. Over there were roundish balls of metal piled up like mountains, and several tables standing next to those piles. Bring those tables and steel balls here. How many of them should we move? Zed smirked maliciously at Haytona's question. 4 tables, and as many steel balls as you can. The three boys began moving the tables and balls towards the center of the hidden area. The steel balls were heavier than your average person. Moreover, when they picked one up, they felt something dense moving around inside. What are these? As he moved the steel balls, Jean scanned through his memories and confirmed that he had never seen these objects in his past life. Yet he wasn't surprised about that. From what he had deduced, these steel balls were used to teach the direct Runcandle descendants the clan's swordsmanship. However, Jean wasn't talented enough to enter the intermediate class and train with his uncle in his first life. Thud. Thud. Each time they dropped a ball to the floor, it left dents on the hard ground. Zed only told them to stop after the three boys moved. Around 50 of those steel balls. Do you know what these balls are? He asked as he placed one of them on a table. The ball was now sitting slightly below the height of Zed's waist. No, sir. These steel balls are called clear stones, because you can hear a clear echo resounding when you hit them. The Tana twins tilted their heads in confusion. They couldn't understand why they needed these stones in order to train their swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Jean didn't show his emotions, but he was curious to know how they'd end up using these clear stones. Zed slowly unsheathed the sword attached to his waist and placed it against the clear stone. I will swing my blade down onto this ball a total of 3 times. Try comparing the sounds that are created. The first swing. Zed didn't put much force behind his sword and simply lowered his blade onto the ball lightly. Thump! A rather thick and murky sound echoed in the room. It felt as if one would feel nauseous by listening to it for an extended period of time. Not a pleasant sound, isn't it? Soon enough, Zed struck the ball again. This time, his swing contained far more strength and speed than before. Clang! This time, a pure and elegant sound worthy of the clear stone's name resonated in the room. It felt like the sound entered their ears and soothed their entire bodies from the inside. "Oh!" the twins exclaimed simultaneously. Jin's eyes also widened as he stared at the clear stone. It's also quite pleasant for me to listen to. It's been a while since I last heard this sound. As you have seen, the clear stone emits a thick and murky sound when you hit it weakly, but creates a beautiful sound when hit with the perfect amount of strength. It was a simple principle. But Jin was concerned about how Zed didn't tell them what this perfect amount of strength was exactly. Thus, he soon realized the purpose behind this training method. The goal of this exercise is to create that beautiful sound every single time you strike the clear stone. Striking it with the perfect amount of force and speed once would be easy to achieve. But after observing Zed's behavior, it seemed that achieving it every single time was a much harder exercise. They would have to strike the ball countless times until they found the perfect strength. However, the boys would most likely be distracted by the unpleasant sounds created by their imperfect strikes every time. Even so, just because their concentration has been disturbed doesn't mean they could abandon this exercise. In other words, this exercise was also to train their willpower and mental strength. But why did he say he'd strike it 3 times? The first and second swings were to show the importance of fine control over one's strength. The third swing would most probably be for the same objective. Jin couldn't see another reason behind hitting the clear stone. We're doing this exercise since it fits the run candle's physical capabilities quite well. Uncle said that this training was simple and unsophisticated. However, there's far too few dangerous hazards in this exercise. The run candle-style swordsmanship was all about overpowering another and ruling by force. In other words, their techniques were powerful enough that it could potentially harm its user. Thus, there was no way the training exercise that was only accessible to pure-blooded run candles would be so safe and risk-free. There was definitely something shaking around inside the clear stones when I picked them up. It felt and sounded like some piece of metal. Ah! Jin found the answer to his question as Zed raised his sword one last time. He then immediately grabbed the back of the Tana twins' necks standing on both of his sides and pushed. And now the third strike. "Get down!" Jin shouted as he shoved them forward. The surprised twins fell to the ground along with their little brother due to his strength. As soon as they touched the floor, the twins were about to hurl curses at Jin, but could only blink their eyes in shock as they watched the situation unfold. Boom! With Zed's final swing, the clear stone exploded with a deafening roar, and from within it came hurling out dozens of steel marbles. They flew in all directions like arrows. An average person would have easily died from being pierced by all these powerful projectiles. Eh! Ha! Wah! The astonished twins stared at their surroundings. They felt their heart drop as the marbles rolled around on the ground. The youngest has great instincts. These clear stones have been designed to explode if they sustain too great of an impact. Zed spoke with a pleased smile on his face. Jin got up and dusted himself off. It seemed that his uncle wasn't in his right mind either. He had put his nephews in life-threatening danger without a word of warning beforehand. Was anyone in this clan actually sane? In any case, Jin began to ponder. Every run candle has gone through this training. Since most of my siblings have been taught by Uncle Zed as well, they somehow survived this hazardous demonstration. In Jin's case, he had survived the explosion by getting on the ground in time thanks to his instincts. The Tana twins had survived thanks to their brother. Then what about all the others? You 3 are the first ones not to get injured during the Clear Stones demonstration session since Luna. Other than her and you boys, all your other siblings were gravely wounded by the steel marbles. You can think of this as a rite of passage. As they watched Zed laughing out loud, the Tana twins once again realized that their upcoming adventures in the intermediate class were full of pain, agony, and struggles. Meanwhile, Jean felt proud by the fact that they were the first ones to be unscathed. After Luna, "Uncle, may I ask you how eldest sister Luna avoided these steel projectiles?" You'll get upset if you hear about it. At least, all your other siblings got upset when they heard what she did. I do not mind. Technically speaking, Luna couldn't avoid the marbles like you. In fact, none of your siblings managed to avoid them all. She just received them head-on, but didn't get injured. She was just that robust and strong. Just as Zed had warned them, it was a somewhat disheartening story. Even so, Jean was quite satisfied. Had one of his siblings avoided all the pellets while being ignorant of the dangers of this demonstration, it would have meant that they were more gifted and talented than Jean himself. In any case, I assume that you three have understood the content of this exercise. From today onwards, you boys will spend your afternoons swinging your swords onto the steel balls every day. You'll only stop when you're able to strike the clear stones in any circumstances and successfully create a clear and beautiful sound each time. Luna's room. The woman in question was spending a peaceful and relaxing time inside, sipping on a cup of tea with her nanny. It's about time the youngest starts to show some results from our mind's eye training sessions. It'll hurt if he gets hit by the clear stone's projectiles, but I'm sure he'll manage to do something about it. It's so gratifying to watch him grow up and get stronger. Siup. Lady Luna. Yes, Nanny? I believe that Lady and Mew are quite suspicious. There was the incident where they tried to keep young Master Jean in check to take into account. The two of them were conversing about the potential suspects behind the assassination attempt on Jean when he was merely a year old. There has already been an assassination attempt against me. I've never talked about it to anyone else, not even Gilly, and due to that incident my fight has already begun. Ever since Luna first heard Jin's words when she visited him at the Storm Castle, she has been searching for the culprit to this day. She hadn't given up even after 5 whole years. It was because she greatly cared about her youngest brother. But that wasn't the only reason. It was a long-established and traditional taboo within the clan for a pure-blooded Runcandle residing in the main house to aim for the life of a family member that had yet to leave the Storm Castle. If Luna informed Siren about this incident, it would cause great chaos within the clan. However, she judged that doing so wouldn't benefit Jean, so Luna decided against reporting to her father. Moreover, they had no evidence to show Siren about this attempted assassination. It's true that those two are very domineering and tend to step over their boundaries, but I don't think so. Would they be crazy enough to attempt to assassinate someone inside the Storm Castle? Technically speaking, Jean hadn't been the target of an assassination attempt, but rather the target of the bladed illusion curse. However, Luna wasn't aware of this truth yet. To be truthful, I believe that there's the possibility of young Master Jean having lied to you. He was only 10 years old back then, so isn't it highly likely? We haven't found out anything after all these years. I don't think Jean lied to me. Back then, he was wary of me. Not because he found it awkward to interact with me for the first time ever, but because he was on guard. His gaze. It was the gaze of someone whose life was being threatened. Then should we investigate Lady Mew and Anne for the time being? Yeah, I'll leave it in your care. I'm more concerned by the fact that we haven't discovered anything so far. Something's wrong. I have an ominous presentiment. I feel the same way, but I'm more concerned for you, Lady Luna. I'm worried your siblings will break your heart again. Haha. I'm already in my 30s, Nanny. Luna hid her bitter smile with her teacup, and so a day went by. Jean and the Tana twins had yet to create a beautiful sound by striking the clear stones. Fortunately, there were still no incidents where someone accidentally burst the steel balls. Thump! Thud! The unpleasant noises have been echoing inside the hidden training room for 4 hours straight. I can declare with certainty that amongst all the training I've done in my life, this is by far the nastiest. These abominable sounds had been disturbing his concentration. The twins had already vomited on the ground a couple of times. In the meantime, Jean was sweating buckets, but somehow managed not to let go of his sword and drop to the ground. In the morning, he had experienced the intermediate class's hellish training, and in the afternoon he was constantly hitting the clear stones. Jean was on the verge of death. He couldn't get used to these unpleasant sounds and echoes no matter how hard he tried to. Take a 5-minute break. As soon as the words left Zed's mouth, the three boys sat cross-legged on the floor. However, the Tana twins' posture was terrible as they were exhausted both mentally and physically. In fact, the 5-minute break wasn't quite a break. According to Zed's training regime, the boys had to hold their swords straight and cover them in aura while sitting upright and maintain that position during the so-called break. So the break was, in other words, an exercise where they were training their aura. Jin's hands were trembling as they squeezed the sword's handle, whereas the Tana twins couldn't even hold onto theirs properly. While it was the nastiest training Jin had ever experienced, it wasn't the most difficult one. In his past life, Jin had trained several dozens of times more than others in order to become a 1-star knight by the age of 25. Compared to his despairing and miserable days back then, this exercise with the clear stones was somewhat bearable. The purpose of this training was to increase our aura's destructive power in the first place. Zed had destroyed the clear stone without using any aura, but that was only possible because he was an 8-star knight. The three boys first had to train and develop their auras in order to strike the clear stones with enough force to make a beautiful sound, let alone make them explode. Daytona, Haytona. Sit straight. If you can't endure this, you won't be able to survive within the clan. As Zed spoke calmly, the twins fixed their postures with tears in their eyes. It was tear-jerkingly difficult for them, but Jin knew that they would successfully become flag-bearers of the clan thanks to his past life's knowledge. Even my stupid brothers managed to become flag-bearers in the past, so there's no way I won't be able to do it. Therefore, there was no need for Jin to feel impatient. The boy closed his eyes and focused his senses on the aura covering his sword. Thump, thump. Even though he could hear the residual auditory hallucinations from the echoes earlier, Jin kept his eyes closed and concentrated. He was quite good at erasing all distracting thoughts and keeping his eyes closed. I noticed it the first day as well, but that kid, he's quite something. The Tana twins aren't doing so badly either, but this one, he might even break Luna's record. Zed praised Jin in his mind but didn't express it out loud. He could always praise the boy when he broke Luna's record. Chapter 34. Fight, Win, Enjoy. 4. The clear stone training session only ended at 9 p.m. After the Tana twins collapsed side by side. They had completely exhausted their physical and mental strength that they ended up falling unconscious. Pathetic. Zed clicked his tongue and called the medical team. Meanwhile, Jin didn't fully agree with his uncle's statement. It's quite impressive they've lasted this long in the first place. Jin was still standing on both feet. His legs were trembling like crazy and the unpleasant ringing was still echoing in his mind. But he was standing. The attitude and dedication the twins had shown today were praiseworthy. In all honesty, even Jin was on the verge of collapsing. If the training had continued for another 30 minutes, he would have surely flopped onto the ground. The medical team placed the twins on stretchers and took them out. Make sure you tell your brothers that if they plan on fainting during tomorrow's training as well, they shouldn't come to class in the first place. I understand. Jin exited the hidden training room and pondered to himself as he walked back to his dorm. Seeing Uncle's reaction, I was close to disappointing him as well. Had the training been slightly longer, I would have fainted, and Uncle would have considered me a failure as well. I should be more careful tomorrow. However, Zed was having different thoughts than what Jin was predicting. He stayed behind in the hidden room, staring at the spots where his three nephews had been standing until moments ago. The Tana twins ended up collapsing far later than what I was initially expecting. Kikek, they're run candles, all right, but the youngest. Despite being 2 years younger than the twins, he had managed to endure the training today without falling unconscious. It was an incredible feat, considering his body hadn't developed as much as theirs. A shame. Such a shame. Why did he have to be born as the youngest? According to what Zed had witnessed today, Jin was the most talented child amongst Siren's 13 children. While it was debatable whether or not he was better than Luna, He was far more gifted than Joshua, the soon-to-be patriarch. However, he was too young. Jean was only 15 years old. Even if he trained seriously and became a 9-star knight by the age of 30, Joshua would already be leading the clan by then. These days, the patriarch's authority and power were slowly beginning to be transferred over to Joshua already. Very slowly but steadily. If only he were born 10 years earlier, he would have had the Runcandle clan in his grasp. Currently, Jin's talents and growth speed were seeds that would sow chaos and havoc in the clan. If Jin were to become the strongest person in the clan in 10 or 15 years and aimed for the throne, how much damage would he cause to Joshua's rule? To the Runcandle clan? And what if the clan's enemies, such as the Zipfels, took advantage of the inner conflict to attack the clan? As his thoughts reached that conclusion, Zed let out a deep sigh. Let's keep watch for now. Seeing how Luna cares for him, Jean might grow up to resemble her. He might become a shadow that protects the clan just like that child. Countless variables that could affect Jin's future and growth existed. The boy could die during a mission or could suddenly decide to leave the clan one day and become a wanderer. Children go through many different experiences and incidents as they grow up. So Zed couldn't predict Jean and the clan's future as of yet. March 1795. A month had gone by. Jean and the Tana twins were in open warfare for hegemony from day one, but since they were stuck in the Clearstone training room the entire afternoon, there were no real fights between them. Ever since Kajin Ramello was cut down by Jean, the other cadets didn't dare lay a finger on the youngest division even when the young master was away. They had also been ordered by Mew and not to do so. Jin's two older sisters had decided not to interfere with the happenings within the intermediate training class. Just as he had predicted, they had no more expectations for the Tana twins. The idiots had borrowed their best intermediate class cadet and had returned him defective, so they had no reason to support the twins anymore. It's so peaceful that it's concerning. Mesa spoke as she dusted the dirt off her clothes, which were in terrible condition as they had just finished their morning training session. The cadets around her were in the same condition as her. Do you think the young master is doing okay in the afternoons? We don't even know what they're being taught. Bellop asked with a worried tone, but Mesa snorted. We aren't at the level where we can worry about the young master. But from time to time, I hear explosions inside the hidden training room along with people screaming. The medical team always seems to be in a hurry to head inside when that happens. The Tana young masters were even brought out on stretchers before the training session had ended 2 days ago. Stop worrying and focus on your own training. Don't you remember what the young master told us? We'll be assigned missions soon enough. Disgustingly difficult missions, according to the young master. Except for Mesa, Scott, Jushin, Taimont, and Kiko, the other members of the youngest division didn't reach the average level of intermediate class cadets. In other words, Eddington, Sierra, Phils, and Bellop weren't supposed to be sent out on missions yet. Well, technically speaking, Bellop was skilled enough. He just hadn't recovered a good enough mental strength yet in order to utilize his abilities to the maximum. I do not wish to be a hindrance to the young master from now on, so we should focus on our own problems right now. We all need to reach 3-star at the very least before we're given our first missions. She's right. And it's thanks to young Master Jean that we're not being harassed or persecuted during this faction war. The cadets nodded with resolute expressions. Attention! The intermediate training class's assistant instructor, Male Trazel, yelled out loud. There were a total of 3 assistant instructors in the intermediate class, and they were all guardian knights of the Runcandle clan. Male was the main assistant instructor. The first missions of this year's intermediate class have been issued. There are a total of 5 missions. I will now call out names. The cadets who have their names called must step forward. There are a total of 60 cadets who will be dispatched this time. The cadets who had spent several years in the intermediate class didn't show any particular reactions. However, those who were in their 3rd year or less were showing tense expressions. The first is a monster subjugation mission. The subjugation targets are goblins. You shall hear the details of the mission from Petro, the second butler. The cadets involved are Denkello, Atten, John. The second is a bodyguard mission. The commissioners that need protection are the rookies within the Minche Smithy Association. It would be beneficial to some of you if you get friendly with them. Those involved are Houston, baiting. The third mission is another monster subjugation. The targets are orcs this time. The area of operations is an unprotected zone as well. The cadets involved are, Male's hand stopped once he flipped the page. He frowned before making sure he had read the names right on the document. The area of operations is an unprotected area, but all the cadets are newcomers. Young Master Jean will be displeased by this. It'll be difficult for everyone to return alive. But it's not like we can complain to the flag bearers. Male coughed awkwardly before finishing his sentence. Mesa, Scott, Tymont, Kiko, Jushin, Eddington, Sierra, Phils, and David. Petro will inform you about the details as well. I bid you all Godspeed. A ruckus began amongst the intermediate cadets. Not only were the targets orcs, but they were to enter an unprotected zone. Half or more of the youngest division would certainly die during this mission. However, there wasn't a single word of protest addressed to the assistant instructors. Since the flag bearers had chosen this lineup, they had no say in this. If someone were to object to this, it had to be the faction's leader, Jean himself. If Jean were to go find the flag bearers personally in order to complain, he could easily change the members of the third mission. He could either make a deal or make use of Luna's authority and influence. However, that would end up biting him back later on. He would be publicly admitting that his faction's members weren't skilled enough to be sent on official missions. And if he made use of Luna's authority, Jean would be proving that he himself had no power or qualifications. In this case, Jean would checkmate himself. Thus, the youngest division had no choice but to go along with it and carry out the mission. Instructor, what are the fourth and fifth missions? Those were assigned to the young masters. You need not concern yourselves. Dismissed. Once you've had lunch, the cadets who were assigned missions may take a break from class until they depart. You will be dispatched in 2 days. Once the assistant instructors made their leave, a commotion began within the cadets. Damn, good luck to those kids. There's going to be at least 4 or 5 deaths. It would have been better for them to not be a part of any faction. Didn't I say so? If you join the wrong faction, you'll only see a sea of blood. The poor kids. The cadets who were part of Mew and Anne's faction, like Kajin, all wore suspicious grins as they nodded between themselves. We'll have to prepare some coffins. Kikek. We should have a proper funeral for them. Since they have 2 days left, let's have someone paint their portraits in advance. Oh, and they shouldn't forget to write a will. Wahaha. Have a good trip, you cutie pies. Otherwise, you could ask young Master Jean for some help. Please save us. Please save us. Kekekek. The cadets in Mew and Anne's faction giggled between themselves as they stared at the youngest division. Tymont was about to stand up and face them, but Mesa grabbed him by the shoulder and held him back. Endure it. We still can't win against them, and starting a fight right before we leave on a mission will do us no good. But those bastards were... Shut up and sit down, Tymont. You don't want to cause problems for the young master, do you? Do I really have to spell it out to you? A fuming Tymont sat back down. What do we do? Sierra sighed deeply. The other members of the youngest division were also wearing distressed expressions. Is that a question? This is the Runcandle clan. If they want us to go out and fight, we go and fight. We'll do whatever we can to accomplish the mission successfully and return alive. That's the one and only way we can trample on those bastards' pride and humiliate them. Mesa spoke as she ground her teeth. Despite her confident front, her hands were trembling lightly. No, she wasn't afraid of death. She was simply disappointed in herself that she could only be a hindrance to young Master Jean and cause him problems. Boom! Arg! Hey Tona! Ugh! Hey Tona's clear stone had exploded. This was already his third stone today. The steel marbles grazed Daytona and headed towards Jean, who was concentrating on his own sword and steel ball. Daytona was hit in the chest and Jean in the flank. Had it been his own steel ball exploding, Jean would have avoided the projectiles. But someone else's ball exploding and marbles flying at him from the side? Even that was unavoidable for him. Zed was sitting in the corner, calmly reading the mission documents as if he didn't care what was happening to them. Ugh. Fuck. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Daytona. Sorry, Jean. I didn't do that on purpose. Daytona fearfully approached Jean. Daytona followed suit as he scratched the back of his head. As he watched their actions, Jean began to wonder if they were truly the same nefarious homicidal maniacs from his first life. I'm fine, but from now on, I want you two to practice in that corner over there. Sure. The Tawna twins grunted as they pushed their tables towards the corner. There was a reason why the twins were so obedient to their little brother. After having spent time training together for an entire month, they soon realized that their uncle's words were correct. Do not confront the youngest until you two are strong enough. That is, if you wish to live long. The Jean they had witnessed so far was a beast. Today, the Tawna twins had finally gained enough strength to make the clear stones blow up 3 to 4 times per session. However, Jean had already been blowing the stones up since a couple of days ago, creating 5 to 6 explosions every session. Today, I will definitely create a clear sound. Definitely. His flank was throbbing from the pain. He didn't feel his ribs cracking, so he was physically fine. However, his breath was completely erratic now. Phew. Jean closed his eyes and regulated his breathing. He could subconsciously see the clear stone surface, its rigidity, and its weight in his mind, despite the darkness. As the pain in his flank kept disturbing his focus, Jean felt a sudden change. Ha! A strange sensation overtook his senses. For some reason, he could precisely see the direction the steel marble had flown to hit him despite his closed eyes. It was being drawn in his mind. What is this? Why do I suddenly feel like? As he was about to open his eyes and verify the marble's actual trajectory, Zed suddenly stood up. Jean and the Tawna twins immediately ran before him and corrected their stances. The details of your missions have been delivered. Chapter 35. Receiving his first solo mission, the Tawna twins' mission was to attend a ceremony. They were being ordered to attend several events and parties organized by the Vermont Emperor and the Empire's dukes to curry favors with them. In truth, calling this invitation to parties a mission was an embarrassment. There was absolutely no risk of them seeing any blood or conflict during this mission. All they had to do was eat the excellent dishes prepared at the parties and have fun in the Empire. Ugh! A ceremony? In the Vermont Empire at that. However, the Tawna twins' faces crumpled once they heard the details of their mission. Attending ceremonies was a type of mission that was only assigned to direct members of the Runcandle lineage. The clan could ignore invitations and the like from your average nation, but the Empire's invitation was a different story. The Runcandles couldn't refuse them so easily. Thus, one of the Runcandle children had to accept the invitation and attend the events. So whenever an invitation arrived from the Vermont Empire, the Runcandle children prayed to avoid being chosen. None of them wanted to attend those sickening and boring parties. My condolences, boys. Thanks to your sacrifices, your siblings won't have to go to the Empire and dance around aimlessly. Ha! Is that a sigh I hear? Although it's an invitation to parties, this is a bona fide mission. If you show this sort of attitude again, I'll beat you two up so badly you'll beg me to kill you. The Tawna twins nodded as they hid away their disgusted expressions. This mission was more or less a punishment for them. Their elder sisters were punishing them, as they had failed to trample on their youngest sibling even after borrowing a 5-star cadet from their faction. Attending parties was a drudgery for the twins, as they didn't have an ounce of oratory skills and hadn't learnt the subtle art of surviving in social situations. Geez, elder sister Mew and Anne are so ill-natured. Jean laughed to himself. It's a mission someone has to accomplish. And when you arrive on site, you will see dozens of powerful people, whether it be in their combat prowess or their authority and influence. Make sure you observe them carefully. Understood, Uncle? And you, Jean? Yes, Uncle. The mission you've been assigned is... Zed stopped halfway through the sentence. The Tawna twins paid close attention to his next words. They were curious to know how crazy of a mission their sisters had assigned to their youngest sibling. Hopefully, it was something that would break Jean physically and mentally. In fact, the best-case scenario would be that Jean wouldn't return at all from the mission. An assassination task. Your target is the master of the hidden palace, Talaris's plaything. You basically need to kill a loafer, the master of the hidden palace. That is the title given to the owner of the hidden palace, an enormous tower standing in the middle of the West Sea. The 51st master is Talaris, nicknamed the Abyssal Spider. The hidden palace is an independent force that is influenced by neither the Runcandles nor the Zipfels. Uncle, by plaything, you mean the Abyssal Spider's plaything? It's that woman's lover. Jin's assassination target was the master's plaything. In other words, her paramour. Jean had to kill one of the countless young men Talaris was playing around with. Oh snap! The Tana twins unintentionally let out words of shock. They didn't believe that Jean would be able to kill the master of the hidden palace's lover and return alive. Talaris's notoriety was known around the world, even to the country bumpkins living in some corner of the Mytel kingdom. She was especially known for being merciless to the people who laid a finger on her lovers. Your target is currently residing in the lawless zone of Mummet under the protection of members of the hidden palace. Mummet? Holy smokes! The twins exclaimed out loud once again. Missions in the Mummet lawless zone were generally assigned to guardian knights. It wasn't a mission that a mere intermediate-class cadet like Jean was supposed to undertake. Killing the master of the hidden palace's lover in Mummet. You could easily summarize the mission with that sentence. The Tana twins already believed that Jean would never return alive from this mission. There is one question I'd like to ask, Uncle. What is it? Who is our client? As Jean asked in a confident tone, Zed's lips rose into a soft smirk. This kid. He should know who the master of the hidden palace and where Mummet is, but he's going to accept the mission immediately? If he claimed the mission was irrational, I would have been willing to go. Say a word to the flag-bearers myself. Zed was somewhat hoping Jean would be shocked and vexed. Recently, the elder's greatest enjoyment was watching his youngest nephew grow. Even the unsympathetic Zed didn't appreciate sending a yet-to-be-fully forged sword on a dangerous mission like this where it would most certainly break. However, Jean didn't show an ounce of shock or vexation. Since the cadet in question was planning on accepting the mission, Zed had no reason to intervene. The Tsendler clan, your target, the loafer, is called Alcaro Tsendler, the disgrace of the clan. I see now. They're worried that the child who left the clan will spill the clan's secrets to the master of the hidden palace. Exactly. It seems the Tsendler clan tried to solve this issue on their own, but gave up and came to us instead. Looks like the child in question doesn't have a good reputation in the first place. Can you do it? Zed asked with great anticipation. He was deeply hoping the words, "This mission should be assigned to guardian knights instead," would leave Jin's mouth. I will do it. Why are you so? No, never mind. Che, it's good to be decisive. Zed coughed awkwardly, before handing over the documents to his nephews. You will all depart in 2 days. You are excused from the afternoon training sessions until then. In the meantime, make sure to train on your own, but only to the extent that it doesn't hinder your mission. Yes, Uncle. Zed exited the hidden training room first. The Tana twins stood around Jean awkwardly for a while. While they felt ecstatic by the fact that their brother was about to die, they were also disgruntled by it, as if there was a bitter taste in their mouths. The twins didn't know that they had a strong bond of love and hatred with their little brother. What? No, good luck. Come back safely. Yeah, it's not like you're gonna die, right? If something goes wrong, just reveal that you're a run candle. Then no one will be able to lay a finger on you. Haha, geez, are you worried about me? I didn't know you two had such adorable sides to you. We're not worried. Before I return. Jean interrupted Daytona and unsheathed Bradamanti, covering it in aura. The twins froze as their brother had suddenly pulled out his weapon. Swoosh! Before they could even ask what he was doing, Jean swung his sword, aiming it at the clear stone sitting behind them. Clang! A beautiful metallic sound resonated, bouncing off the arched ceiling and echoing in the room. Jean smiled in satisfaction. He had suddenly felt like he would definitely succeed if he struck the clear stone right now, and that feeling turned into reality within a few instants. 1 month had passed since they began training with the clear stones. Jean had no idea how inconceivable this record was. You two should make a choice, elder brothers. Whether you prefer our elder sisters or me. The Tana twins gulped audibly before clumsily nodding. Jean then exited the room, leaving the two of them behind in silence. What do we do? I don't know. Elder sisters are out of their minds, while our younger brother is not in his right mind. Seriously, but I think that the youngest is scarier than elder sisters. I agree. The twins sighed in dejection. Having made his way outside, Jean wasn't concerned about his mission. Rather than the dangerous task, his mind was far more interested in another topic. What was that sensation earlier? The steel marble that had come flying out of the clear stone Haytona had blown up. After getting hit by it, Jean suddenly pictured the marble's detailed trajectory in his mind for no reason. It also felt like if another marble came hurling at him from the same direction, he would be able to avoid it. I should ask elder sister Luna about this once I return from my mission. This sensation might be related to the training I had been doing with her. 2 days went by in a flash. Those who had been assigned a mission had finished their preparations yesterday. All that was left to do was to go to the Huphester transfer gate and teleport to their respective destinations. Phew! Young master. Before he got on the steel carriage, the members of the youngest division called out to him. They were all wearing somber expressions, as if they were a herd of cows being led to a slaughterhouse. No one could guess how many of them would die in their upcoming mission. However, that wasn't the only reason they were dejected. We heard you're going to the Mummet Lawless Zone. Indeed, I need to go to the transfer gate separately since I was tasked with an assassination mission. I also need to go through all the administrative procedures properly. How annoying. We've come to bid you farewell before departing. The reason why the youngest division had come to salute him was quite obvious. This could be the final time they would see the young master. Not only was it likely that some of them would die during their mission in the unprotected area, young Master Jean himself was tasked with a mission in which he had an 80% chance of dying. Other than Jean, everyone else in the intermediate class thought he was headed to his death. No need to. Why? Do you think we'll never see each other again? Jean said in a playful tone, to which Mesa sighed deeply. The other cadets couldn't even lift their heads up properly to face the young master. Well, it's true that life doesn't always go the way one expects it to. Some of us may die on our mission if we're ill-fortunate. We'll be okay. But the mission you were assigned is... Geez. No need to worry about me, you brats. Focus on your own mission only. All right? Yes. Get going, then. We'll see each other when we're back. The youngest division hesitantly stood around before going down the corridor. Such endearing kids. Keep them safe, Murakan. Meow. I've said this already, but make sure you don't get seen, all right? Moo. The black cat raised its front paw and waved it, as if he were saying, worry more about yourself, kid. I'll be lonely for a while since both of you are leaving, young master, Lord Murakan. Think of it as a break, Gilly. Do you want some souvenirs from Mummet? I know that you're stronger than intermediate class cadets, young master, but please be careful. Mummet is a dangerous place. To think that you have to assassinate the master of the Hidden Palace's paramour. Please take good care of yourself. Yes, I'll see you soon. Jean didn't get on the steel carriage, but rather on horseback. He had already dyed his hair brown yesterday and was currently dressed like an ordinary traveler. The boy had Bradamanti with him, but he had covered the blade in a layer of metallic coating to conceal its normal color. With such a disguise, no one would ever think of him as a run candle. This was his second mission, but his first solo mission. As Gilly had stated, the current Jean was quite a force to be reckoned with if you took all his abilities into account. Even so, the mission was a dangerous one where he could lose his life. Nevertheless, Jean was fearless. In fact, he was excited about how he'd be able to use spiritual power and magic as much as possible. I've always wanted to visit Mummet since my past life. Before his regression, Jin's magic teacher had mentioned that Mummet was more of a romantic city than he had expected. Having spent 2 years in Mummet, his master would tell fond stories about the city. Within those stories were countless details about the city and its populace. I remember Master saying that the pubs in the center of the city are locations where informers and spies often go. And if I want to buy high-class information, I need to head to the underground black market. To think that his master's boring stories would come in handy like this. Of course, there was a difference in time period, so some of the information may be inaccurate for now. But the system and order within the city was unlikely to have changed. With a feeling of gratitude towards his master in his heart, Jin pulled on the horse's reins and began his journey. A refreshing sense of liberty rushed through him as he departed the Garden of Swords on his own. Translator's section. Jin's off on his first solo journey. Can't wait to see what happens also. The Moron twins are starting to grow on me. They're like cute little idiots, ha ha ha. I hope they get redeemed and become allies Jin can trust. Chapter 36. Mummet Lawless Zone 1. The Mummet Lawless Zone was a region where all kinds of criminals and offenders gathered. There were even rumors around the world that due to the evil energy these lawbreakers emitted, this criminal-infested land was so desolate that no plants could grow on it. But it was no rumor. Mummet was, in actual fact, a barren wasteland where not a single strand of grass grew. The scorching sun that glared down on the area. The criminals that crawled around in the small city like disgusting insects. There was no gateway to enter the city. There was only a broken signpost surrounded by rubbish. And once you walked past that signpost, you were inside Mummet. Here comes a newcomer. You sons of bitches. A hulking man shouted as he barged inside one of the pubs in the center of the city. He was carrying an equally large and terrifying iron mace on his back. Bwahaha, newcomer my ass. I bet you're back 'cause you were put on the wanted list again. Freaking hell? Are you a salmon or something? Stop coming back all the time. The people inside the pub cheered joyfully as they all recognized the hulking man. Mocking someone until one loses their voice, pointing fingers, and throwing entire mugs of beer are Mummet's traditional yet peculiar ways of greeting others. Crash, smash, clang. The thick mugs smashed into the newcomer's head and chest. The glass fragments covered the floor along with a sea of beer. Nevertheless, the barman didn't even bother glancing at the mess, let alone clean it up. The hulking man that was hit by countless cups smiled delightfully and grabbed one of the glass shards on the floor. Crunch. Soon enough, a sight that one could normally only see in a circus occurred. The man chewed on the piece of glass and swallowed it. That's right. I'm a salmon. The great Thonk's true birthplace is right here, in Mummet. Drink up, everyone. The drinks are on me today. Geez, Thonk. What did you do this time that you had to run away and come back here? Come on, speak up. Let's hear the story. Kuhaha. I, the great Thonk, had some fun with a high-class bitch in the Ekin Kingdom. Oh, who was it? No idea, just some girl from a noble family. And I killed the 5 guards who came to arrest me. Geez, do they seriously think they can capture me with ordinary guards? They kept sending them as well. Kuhaha. Those fucking morons. Yep. That's why I smashed them up like mashed potatoes. About 50 of them. While I was destroying them, I subconsciously headed towards Mummet and found myself here before I realized it. To Thonk's massacre. Cheers. Cheers. Welcome back home. It's good to see you again. Gulp. 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 The men were emptying their glasses. The rowdy craze calmed down as everyone was busy finishing their beers. But in the meantime, creak, one boy entered the bar covered up in a tattered robe. It was Jin. Ha! Looks like there's a real newcomer this time. Thonk and the other men exchanged glances, asking each other if anyone knew who this was. But everyone shook their heads. Thud, thud. A thick noise echoed every time Jin took a step with his old, ragged boots. He silently crossed the room and sat down next to Thonk. 1 glass of cold water. and some simple snacks. Jean took out one silver coin from his chest pocket and flicked it to the barman. Ha! The barman caught the coin and snorted as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Soon enough, the entire pub roared in laughter. Kia! Wow! I thought I was watching the protagonist of an action novel or something. Look at him. He's a natural at acting cool. So, who are you, HM? Some 9-star knight. Can't you see? He's gotta be a legendary swordsman. The men spouting sarcastic comments all simultaneously changed their expressions. They swiftly stood up and surrounded Jean with menacing grins and chuckles. Hey, Mr. Newcomer. The great Thonk, am in a good mood today. So let's not get on each other's nerves, alright? If you get on your knees and suck on everyone's toes right now, I will forgive why. Kurg! Thonk was interrupted before he could even finish his sentence. In fact, he would never be able to finish his sentence ever again because the tip of the dagger Jean had taken out was lodged in Thonk's neck. The hulking man was standing too close to Jean without keeping his guard up, so he didn't even have the time to react to the boy's attack. No one had expected this young brat to stab a giant like Thonk in the neck without a speck of hesitation. Cook! Gar! Once Jean retracted his dagger, blood gushed out of Thonk's wound as he fell to the floor. A long moment of silence followed. No one uttered a single sound. Jean silently waved his finger at the barman, urging him to bring his cold water and snacks. He's gone. Thonk's gone. I knew this would happen one day. Pfft. Soon enough, the men surrounding Jean scattered around. They behaved as if the friendly exchanges they had with Thonk until not long ago were a sham and returned to their respective tables, downing beer in their original groups. This was a common occurrence. No matter how friendly they acted with Thonk, there was no true friendship between them. Just as Master used to say, this place is filled with lunatics. The reason they had shown interest in Jean was because he appeared weak. They were curious to know why a boy, who seemed to have yet to grow any hair down there, had entered a den of criminals like it was nothing. However, their questions had found an answer. Jean killed Thonk with a dagger and, by doing so, gained the approval of the criminals inside the pub. This was how the residents of Mummet truly welcomed a newcomer. I always seem to be in your debt. You've been a great help to me, both in my past and present life. I hope the day comes when I get an opportunity to repay you, Master. Clack. The barman placed a glass cup on Jin's table. A cup of cold water. I didn't put in any poison. Even I know that killing people with poison is a taboo here. You seem to know a great deal about Mummet despite your youth. Are your parents or siblings familiar with this place? None of your business. Cling. This time, Jean flicked a gold coin to the barman, who just shrugged in response. What do you want? Drugs? There's one product that's been the craze in Mummet recently. Or are you looking for someone? The latter. Is that enough to cover the fee? The barman rubbed the coin with a handkerchief and calmly weighed it with his hand. The substantial weight proved that it was a genuine gold coin. Depends on who you're looking for. Is there someone who goes by Hister in this area? No. That I'm certain of. Jean clicked his tongue as if he were disappointed. I see. Then just bring over my snacks. And if you could, recommend some inn to stay at tonight. Preferably a place without any bugs. A place without any bugs signified the safest inn in Mummet. Then I know just the place. There's an inn called the Moonlit Well west of the city. The kings of Mummet reside there, so no need to cause a fuss when you enter. Thanks. Jean emptied his plate of rough bread and dry bacon before leaving the pub. The atmosphere inside the Moonlit Well was vastly different from the pub, since the most influential people of Mummet resided in it. It was surprisingly clean and orderly, just like an ordinary inn outside of Mummet. It wasn't comparable to a high-class inn in a big city, but at the very least, the clients wouldn't come across lowly criminals who behaved like wild dogs. Even if he's the master of the Hidden Palace's lover, he's just the disgrace of the Zenler clan. This is the only place where Alcaro Zenler could stay in the city. There was no real need to go down to the underground black market to buy more information on Alcaro. According to the documents and information sent by the Zendler clan to the Run Candles, Alcaro wasn't someone who would be willing to spend the night in a dirty and damp inn. He was a conceited rich brat who hadn't experienced any hardships in life. Alcaro Zendler acts obedient to powerful people and overbearing to the weak. He only wants premium goods and services and is obsessed with hedonistic pleasures. The only qualities he has are his good looks and his lineage. There was only one reason why this fancy pants was residing in this dangerous city. It was a superficial scheme trying to regain the master of the hidden palace's attention, as she was recently engrossed in another paramour. A childish tantrum along the lines of, "Will you really not show any attention to me when I'm in such a dangerous place?" But if the master of the hidden palace genuinely paid attention to him and came to Mummet to check on Alcaro now, Jean wouldn't have another opportunity to kill him for a long time. If the master herself protected Alcaro personally, even Luna wouldn't be able to assassinate him. That was why the Zendler clan had urgently commissioned the Run Candles using this opportunity. For now, rumors about me will spread around Mummet. Things like, some kid killed Thonk as soon as he arrived, and he's looking for someone called Hister, should spread to everyone. Jean had wreaked havoc in the pub for a reason. After causing a ruckus in a location where low-ranking informants gathered, he had spread false information, saying that he was looking for Hister, that he had come this far in search of this specific person. And this rumor would reach the hidden palace bodyguards protecting Alcaro within the day. Jean had done this because the bodyguards were most likely checking every customer's identity. In consequence, Jean would naturally be excluded from their prioritized surveillance target. If someone were to come with the goal of assassinating Alcaro, they wouldn't suspect a boy like Jean who wasn't hiding his presence and clumsily trudging along in the city. The people who had come to assassinate Alcaro so far were all skilled, hired mercenaries. But since I look a lot sloppier, it's unlikely they'll suspect me much. Alcaro's bodyguards wouldn't focus on people like Jean who had a clear objective. In fact, they would be more wary of someone like Thonk, a criminal who was familiar with the city, who recently returned to Mummet for no apparent reason. An assassin wants to blend in with the residents and mingle with them, trying not to attract attention. But with how Jean was doing it, he was standing out to be forgotten. As they say, it is darkest under the lamp. In fact, his strategy worked like magic. The men who were observing Jean inside the moonlit well during the day visibly let down their guards once night fell. It seems that those three are the hidden palace guards protecting Alcaro. They appear to be 6-star or stronger. If I face them head-on, I have a very low chance of winning. If he fully utilized both magic and spiritual power, Jean could somehow deal with one of them. But 2 or more were impossible. An entire day went by, but Alcaro was nowhere to be seen. Jean came to the conclusion that Alcaro was constantly staying inside his room, eating the food that his bodyguards were bringing him. It's impossible to assassinate him by entering his room. There are probably more men, standing guard inside at all times. In that case, I need to wait for him to come out. Jean recalled Alcaro's personality as it was written in the documents sent by the Zendler clan. Alcaro Zendler is obsessed with hedonistic pleasures. Suddenly, Jean remembered something the barman had told him the day before at the pub. What do you want? Drugs? There's one product that's been the craze in Mummet recently. It was very likely that Alcaro was stuck in his room doing drugs. Once his thoughts reached that conclusion, Jean wiped his forehead and headed downstairs to the lobby. He was planning on cracking open a cold one and getting to know the others in the lobby. But once he arrived, he had to prevent his shock and surprise from appearing on his face. Just why? Why can't you do it? You were getting it fine until yesterday. I cannot do it anymore. God damn it. Go get some more. I'm telling you. The young man having a temper tantrum at the center of the lobby was Alcaro Zendler himself. Jean had memorized his target's face in advance, so he recognized him immediately. It appeared that he was enraged as one of his bodyguards wouldn't get him more of the drugs. Ah, your typical low-life douchebag. Jean smiled maliciously in his mind. Chapter 37. Mummet Lawless Zone 2. Before Jin's regression. Back when he had just been banished from the Garden of Swords, There was a period when he roamed from country to country, sleeping out in the open. He had lost his lifelong goal after being banished from his clan and was surviving like a cripple on the streets. But everything changed when he met his magic teacher. Nevertheless, until the day he met his master, Jean had seen and experienced countless types of criminals and scoundrels in the dark alleyways where no one entered. Petty thieves, robbers, beggars, alcoholics, etc. Those people lived like no tomorrow and were only loyal to their desires. The most notable scumbags amongst them were druggies. Drug addicts. Those people couldn't survive for another day without their drugs. Without their medicine, they would sit lifelessly with hollow eyes and foam in their mouths. But if someone were to offer them the drugs, it was second nature for them to be willing to carve out their hearts to pay. 10 times out of 10, 100 out of 100, 1,000 out of 1,000. Every single drug addict Jean had seen was the same, without a single exception. There were some rare people who had managed to stop their addiction with their superhuman willpower and return to an ordinary lifestyle, but obviously enough, they were 1 in a million. In any case, according to Jin's observations and the documents he had read, Alcaro Tsendler wasn't someone with such strong willpower. Fuck. Please do me a favor, alright? I don't think I can survive for another hour without it. Please, I'm begging you. Alcaro flopped onto the floor and put his hands together, begging his bodyguards. The hidden palace guards were all wearing composed looks, but Jean noticed the slight disgust in their gazes that appeared momentarily. As I've said before, it cannot be done. Our task is to prioritize your safety, young master. Please keep in mind that we're not here to babysit you. If you continue to have a temper tantrum, we will have to… Arg. I don't care. Shut up. If you won't get me the drugs, then I'll do something myself. Fucking hell, just you wait. Once my sweetheart returns, you're all losing your heads. Your heads? Do you hear that? I'll make sure you're all executed. HAA. Huh? Did you just sigh? Am I a joke to you? You lowly guards. You insignificant pleb bastards. I'm from the Tsend. Thwack! One guard suddenly punched Alcaro in the abdomen. The arrogant druggie trembled on the spot for a few seconds before fainting. God damn it. How much longer do we have to protect this piece of crap? I wish he'd just die from an overdose or something. Just why is the master keeping this piece of shit alive? Silence. We just need to fulfill the mission we've been assigned. You mustn't get your personal feelings involved. The guards carried the unconscious Alcaro back to the room. Having witnessed the entire scene, Jean felt like he had discovered a treasure chest full of gold. Alcaro's relationship with his bodyguards is the worst, and it seems like he'd be willing to do anything to get drugs once he wakes up. As he drank the beer the inn's employee brought him, Jean pondered to himself. Assassinating Alcaro would not be such a difficult task in the end. The druggy young master's tantrums would get worse and worse as the days went by, and if his outbursts repeated enough times, Jean would have more opportunities to assassinate him. Throughout the next few days, whether he used magic, spiritual power, or a plain old dagger, killing Alcaro was going to be a piece of cake. But the problem is the aftermath. I need to find a way to avoid the guards and return home safely after I've killed him. That was the most difficult aspect of this mission. It was impossible to kill him in broad daylight inside the inn and escape alive. The 6-star or higher bodyguards were far more physically capable than Jean and could catch up to him in no time. Poison wouldn't work either. If Jean baited Alcaro with drugs and killed him using poison, the entirety of Mummet would be in an uproar. The greatest unwritten taboo in the lawless city is the usage of poison. Jin's head began aching as he tried to come up with a plan. Assassinating Alcaro inside the moonlit well using traditional methods was impossible. Bang! Having chugged down his beer, Jean placed the mug back on the table with vigor. I've made up my mind. Jean had come up with a strategy. He would do a terror attack on the moonlit well using magic from inside his room. The moonlit well was the inn where the kings of Mummet resided, a building where the most notorious and prominent figures amongst the worst criminals of Mummet were gathered. As soon as the terror attack begins, these kings of Mummet would counterattack and track down the culprit. Moreover, their main suspect would be a 6-star or higher magician. If I cast a 4-star spell and enhance its effects with spiritual energy, it should be as powerful as a 6-star spell. The most effective way would be to use the lightning spell Summon Lightning and amplify its firepower. Who in the world would ever believe that a 15-year-old kid was a 6-star magician? No one. Not a single soul. Even Baradin Zipfel, a candidate to become the next Zipfel patriarch, had just become a 6-star magician at the age of 18, shaking the entire world with his genius. Blindly casting 6-star spells at the age of 15 was impossible to do, even for geniuses from the Zipfel clan. No need to overthink this. I'll fill my room with spiritual energy to cover up the traces of magic being cast. When something gets covered in spiritual energy, its existence and presence becomes faint. No matter what it is. Jean had once thrown a dagger covered in spiritual energy and easily managed to kill a 4-star warrior. Mana and aura weren't an exception to this rule either. Jean was confident that he could effortlessly conceal 4-star spells with his spiritual energy. Thus, the guests residing in the Moonlit Well would believe that the terror attack had originated from outside. There was no way the powerful kings of Mummet wouldn't notice mana suddenly being generated inside the inn. Therefore, they'd trust their senses and believe that the culprit was outside. I'll amplify the Summon Lightning spell and drop it on the Moonlit Well. I'll probably be injured as well, but I should be fine since I have Orgel's Pendant with me. Orgel's Pendant could nullify most of the effects of 5-star or lower magic spells. 6-star and onwards were a bit more dangerous, but the pendant's nullifying powers weren't completely useless. With my current mana and spiritual energy, I think I can use the amplified Summon Lightning spell a total of 4 times. If I cast the spell 4 times on different areas of the inn, it should start an uproar amongst the guests. In the meantime, Jean would pretend to be injured and walk around the inn. And once he found Alcaro, he'd kill him and complete his task. It would be even better if Alcaro unluckily got hit directly by one of the lightning spells and died immediately. I've always felt annoyed by how young I am, but it's pretty helpful at times. Just as its name implies, Summon Lightning is a spell that attacks someone with a sudden streak of lightning falling from the sky. It only lasts for an instant. Thus, it would be hard for people to notice that there was spiritual energy mixed in with the spell. And even if someone did discern some dark energy within the streak of lightning, it was likely that they'd just think of it as some unknown variant of the normal spell. Spiritual power wasn't very well known around the world, whereas all kinds of magic variants existed throughout the continent. Jin's regression, his spiritual power, along with his innate talent with magic. Had he been missing one of these, he wouldn't have even thought of attempting a terror attack on the Moonlit Well. There's no need to wait a few more days. We never know what that drug addict might attempt to do if I wait for too long. I'll initiate the plan at noon tomorrow. Instead of attacking during the evening or the middle of the night when most people were asleep, it would be far more efficient to attack in broad daylight. The more people witnessed the 6-star Summon Lightning spell with their own eyes, the more beneficial it was for Jean. 10:30 a.m. Jean descended to the lobby and ordered a late breakfast. He was served freshly baked bread, boiled eggs, and soup. This was all part of his plan. He had to behave like every other guest staying at the Moonlit Well and start his morning as a normal human being. 5 of Mummet's kings were at the lobby eating breakfast as well. They smirked as they sensed the weak aura exuding from Jean. "Kid, you seem to be quite talented for your age, but you shouldn't stay for too long in this city with that level of skills. You'll just be at a disadvantage if you stir up trouble." One of the 5 spoke to the boy. "Thank you for the advice, but there is someone I must find. I will make sure I don't cause any trouble for the people residing here." "Haha, what a docile lamb. Even though you were a ferocious wolf who killed someone with a dagger in mere instants not long ago. You are on a completely different level compared to those drunkards. I know my place and know when not to cross the line. Your manners are adequate. Good. I shall allow you to stay here for a few more days. Thank you very much. I shall never forget how the kings of Mummet took care of me even after I leave the city." Jean slightly lowered his head and left his seat, returning to his room. The kings of Mummet found his attitude endearing and began chatting amongst each other. Mummet is done for. Look, even brats like him are coming and going as they please now. Well, I'm sure he'll leave after a few days. If not, he'll probably get killed by some random lowlifes in the area. Still, he seemed like quite the decent kid. Maybe I should recruit him into our organization as a rookie. Don't. He'll probably end up a cripple if you let your men loose around him due to his good looks. Wahahaha. The kings of Mummet all burst out in laughter. My manners are adequate? What laughable pieces of trash. Having returned to his room, Jean also exploded in laughter. He found it hilarious that the scoundrels who had committed some of the worst crimes in the city were being advocates of manners and courtesy. He couldn't wait to drop some thunderbolts on their heads. Jean sat down cross-legged in the middle of the room. He closed his eyes and released spiritual energy. Soon enough, dark smoky energy began seeping out of his entire body. In order to start the attack at noon, he had to diligently prepare the smaller details early on. I'll fill up the entire room with spiritual energy, so that no one can sense anything from outside. As his room was tiny, he could cover up and fill in every little crack within an hour. This single hour was the most important step of the plan. If someone came to his room during this time, his plan would be in shambles. He could constantly hear footsteps outside his room, in the corridor. It was the sound of the employees cleaning the place and guests leaving and entering their rooms. Well, I have to take a risk. Otherwise, I won't be able to accomplish anything. Jean properly began the spiritual release. As the room filled up with more and more dark energy, the sounds from beyond his door got fainter and fainter. This gave Jean a sense of security and calm. The hour went by. The room was filled with spiritual energy, as if ink had permeated into every surface and into the air. One couldn't discern the outline of the furniture. It was basically synonymous to total darkness. The only entity that had retained color inside the room was Jean. I gotta say, quite the perfect work, Jean. Phew. Jean regained control over his breathing and wiped off the sweat on his forehead. All that was left to do was generating mana and preparing to cast Summon Lightning. I'll make the spiritual energy inside the room disappear by infusing it inside the final Summon Lightning spell. Afterwards, all that's left to do is scream and run out of the room, pretending to be injured, and to check whether Alcaro's alive or not. A simple yet effective strategy. As Jean praised himself and his plan, he began gathering mana in both his hands. Crackle, crack. Blue electricity ran down his arms to his hands as they generated a lot of noise. However, not a single soul could hear sounds outside the room, just as Jean had planned. Next, string-like strands of spiritual energy were mixed into the electricity. Summon lightning. Boom! The first bolt of lightning fell onto the moonlit well, destroying half the building's roof. Arg! Before the casualties could cry out in pain, before the uninjured could raise their heads to look at the sky, a second streak of dark blue lightning struck down on the moonlit well. It was the second attack. People began running out of the ashen and destroyed guest rooms, screaming for their lives. What the? Looks like I chose the wrong day to come here. And a certain girl, who was about to set foot inside the moonlit well, tilted her head in confusion as she watched the spectacle. Chapter 38. Mummet Lawless Zone 3. It seems that a high-ranking magician bears a grudge against one of the guests residing in the moonlit well. Milady. I shall go locate the magician. You stay here and protect Milady. The two men standing beside the girl spoke in turn. However, she just snorted and spoke in a mocking tone. Do you think I'm some powerless idiot who can't even protect herself? There are 6 of our guards inside the inn already. In other words, this may be a terror attack against the hidden palace. Ryu, go search for the magician. Hiten, come check on the guards inside with me. Ryu and Hiten lowered their heads in respect to the lady. The girl who had commanded them was Cirrus Indorma. She was the master of the hidden palace Talaris Indorma's daughter. We can kill someone like Alcaro whenever we want. So instead of him, make it your top priority to check on our guards' safety and well-being. Understood, milady. Ryu leaped in the air to track down the magician. Meanwhile, Cirrus and Hiten entered the inn. Boom! The third bolt of lightning fell onto the moonlit well. This time an entire floor was destroyed, and the kings of Mummet shouted their frustrations at the top of their lungs. Even Cirrus and He-Ten stopped in their tracks. Now that they were seeing it from up close, the lightning bolt's power was far greater than they had expected. Fucking hell. Just which son of a bitch is it? Menka, you bastard. Didn't you say you killed a few magicians from the Zipfel clan not long ago? Aren't they back to get revenge on you? I was bluffing. It never happened. The customers ran out of the inn and bickered amongst each other. But not all of them were doing so. As they were called the Kings of Mummet, some of them were getting ready for battle, while the others were trying to find the source of the magic spells. Immediately, the final lightning bolt struck the inn. The fourth bolt was far stronger than the initial three as Jean had amplified the spell using all the spiritual energy in his room. This, in turn, erased all traces of dark energy in it. Boom! Crash! The streak of electricity struck the inn in the center, and the building was split in half. The divided inn was on the verge of collapsing on either side. Arg! Cook! More guests covered in soot and ashes escaped from the dust and joined the lobby. Barely 30 seconds had passed since the beginning of this pandemonium. The people had no idea who had attacked the moonlit well. Looks like the attacks have ceased. Yes, milady. As Cirrus and He-Ten entered the remains of the building, Jean came falling down from the second floor. Thud. Ugh. Falling from the second floor wasn't that painful, but Jean had dropped the final bolt near his guest room. TL/N. In Korea, you start counting floors from first, second. So there's no ground floor/floor 0. So he didn't fall from that high up. That last one was closer to the level of a 7-star spell. Maybe because I infused all the spiritual energy in the room with the spell. Had it not been for Orgel's pendant around his neck, Jean would have received a fatal injury. But as of right now, he had gotten away with a burnt robe and some veins popping here and there in his body. The boy looked at his surroundings, acting as naturally as possible. He had to check whether Alcaro was still alive or not. While he didn't see his assassination target, Jean did catch the bodyguards running around in a rush. There was still smoke filling up the air in the lobby. If Alcaro had survived the extremely powerful lightning spells, Jean had to find him now and kill him. This was his only chance. Jean was about to take out his dagger, but froze. He looked up and saw an unknown girl looking down at him. Oh, I never thought I'd find a boy around my age here in Mummet. Hey, are you all right? You should head outside to safety for now. Milady, our men seem to be gathered over there. All 6 of them are safe and sound. That's a relief. For now, tell them to assemble. And if they're still protecting Alcaro, just order them to kill him. Understood. And once Ryu finds the magician, go capture him with our men. Since the spells all looked similar, it must be a single magician behind this attack. Yes. The boy on the floor immediately came to a realization as he listened to their exchange. She's the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter. From her attitude, she came all this way to deal with Alcaro. An unexpected encounter. But Jean thought of this meeting as a blessing rather than misfortune. According to what she said, even if Alcaro survived the spells, they'll kill him anyway. So there's no need for me to check on him and kill him myself. Moreover, the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter thinks this attack was caused by a magician and doesn't suspect me. From now on, the person holding the highest authority here in the inn would be the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter. Even if the kings of Mummet were revered by the city and treated as royals here, they didn't stand a chance against her. It's highly likely that she'll suspect this was a terror attack against the Hidden Palace. Then all I need to do is pretend to be terrified and escape from this place. It wasn't just the girl. The rest of the customers residing in the moonlit well were thinking a magician had attacked them. Thus, the chances of Jean being accused as the culprit were extremely low. However, there was one problem. If the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter sees my face, things can get complicated later on in life. It didn't matter much if the leaders of Mummet or the small fry of the city saw his face. They would never meet again in Jin's life, and even if it ended up becoming problematic, he could just silence them in the future. But the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter was a completely different story. She was someone Jean inevitably had to meet if he stayed at the Garden of Swords. "Milady, is everyone all right? Where's Alcaro?" "Ah, we have no excuses. Alcaro has perished from the attacks just now. We have failed to protect him." "Is that so? That's perfect. No need to be ashamed. Good work enduring that moron's irritating behavior so far. I came all this way to deal with him in the first place." While the girl conversed with her men, Jean grabbed a handful of soot and rubbed it all over his face. This was better than nothing to hide his face. Schling! Cirrus unsheathed a pure white sword and raised it in the air. "The Hidden Palace shall now take control over this inn. I am Cirrus Indorma, daughter of the master of the Hidden Palace Talaris. Indorma, captain of the Hidden Palace's 7 swords. All those who oppose will be considered enemies of the Hidden Palace from now on. He-10, order our men to block and regulate all movement and activity in a radius of 500 meters. Make sure nobody can move until Ryu has found the magician." "Understood." "Yes, milady." Did you say you're the master of the Hidden Palace's daughter? Still, this place is Mummet. So as the kings of Mummet, it's a bit irritating if you try to take control of the situation despite our very obvious presence. Also, isn't it highly possible that we were attacked because of the Hidden Palace in the first place? The one who spoke up was the king of Mummet, who had mentioned about manners this morning to Jean. Once he finished stating his point, the other kings around him nodded in agreement. He-10. "Yes, bring me his head." As those terrifying words echoed, He-10 vanished from his spot without a trace. CRRT. The guard appeared behind the opposer out of nowhere, and a metallic linear flash was reflected in everyone's eyes. He-10 brought the head of the dead man, who still had his eyes open, and politely laid it at Cirrus's feet. "I mentioned that all those who oppose would be considered enemies, didn't I? And kings of Mummet? Have you been playing royals in this rubbish heap of a city for so long that you've forgotten your places? Is the Hidden Palace a joke to you kings?" The kings of Mummet all averted their gazes, some coughing awkwardly. They weren't weak in any way. If the kings of Mummet all united their forces, they could even stand a chance against Cirrus's subordinates. However, none of them wanted to have the Hidden Palace as their enemy. Ahem, we don't want to have you people as our enemies either. But at the very least, do respect us and be mindful of our positions. The one who just died wasn't completely wrong either, was he? If it's revealed that the attack was aimed at the guards of the Hidden Palace, we will compensate you for the damages. But what if it's the other way around? What if our men were innocent bystanders of an attack that was aimed at one of you people? Cirrus sharply retorted, to which the kings of Mummet couldn't refute. Sigh, all right, do as you wish. We didn't know that the guards who were protecting that druggie were part of the Hidden Palace. We shall leave you in charge. We also wish to find the magician and kill him, so our goals are aligned. Good. For now, have all the survivors gather here. Currently, one of the Hidden Palace's 7 swords is searching for the magician out there. But it's still possible that the culprit is someone amongst you. That's unlikely. None of us are magicians. I don't doubt that, but it's possible that one of you recently got on the bad side of this magician in question. Pieces of trash like you cause all kinds of trouble wherever you go. Am I right? In any case, have everyone gather here. The kings of Mummet all sighed as they descended the stairs along with the other survivors. Meanwhile, Cirrus lowered her gaze. Why are you still dilly-dallying here? Didn't I tell you to head outside to safety about 3 minutes ago? Unlike her conversation with the kings of Mummet, Cirrus was using a much softer and tender tone when addressing Jean. The boy curled up in order to hide his face as much as possible. That's because it's terrifying, and I hurt my leg earlier. I'm sorry. Ahahaha, you're quite fearful for a young man, even though you've got a sword at your belt. How cute. Now get moving, and forget everything you saw today. Oh, and put this on your leg before leaving. Thank you very much. Cirrus took out an ointment that was brewed using healing mana. Jean was about to receive it with his sooty hands, but Cirrus smiled and shook her head. Look at your dirty hands. Just let me put it on you. Pull back your pant leg. Still, aren't you quite the lucky one? Not only did you survive a terror attack, I, Cirrus Endorma, am personally putting ointment on your leg. You should feel honored. Jean clumsily pulled back his pant leg. Cirrus crouched down and rubbed some ointment on the boy's shin. In the middle of his shin was a deep and long gash. Why is she so kind? The master of the Hidden Palace's daughter was infamous in my first life for being crazed and out of her mind. Were the rumors completely unfounded? Once she finished putting on the ointment, Cirrus and Jin's gazes met each other. The girl had not a single ounce of suspicion towards the boy. Furthermore, she was happy to finally meet someone of her age group in this desolate city and felt like helping him out. They're all done. He-10. Why is Ryu taking so long? Don't tell me he can't find the magician? That Ryu. He is somewhat late indeed. Should I head out there and search for the culprit as well? Forget it. The magician seems to be skilled at concealing themselves. Even so, they must be inside the city, so it's only a question of time. I doubt Ryu won't be able to find his target. It's just a measly magician after all. I concur. After straightening his pant leg, Jean stood up and bowed deeply. How can I return this favor? As he asked her, Jean had to hold back the smile that was about to creep up on his face. After completing the terror attack, if the kings of Mummet held him back for some reason, things could have gotten complicated for him. However, the situation had unfolded so easily. Moreover, Cirrus wasn't trying to check Jin's face properly either. She was simply showing him kindness and sending him on his way. How could you ever repay a debt to someone like me? Just think of this as a nice memory. And if you remember me from time to time, just bow in the direction of the Hidden Palace whenever you can. Well then, bye. Having left the moonlit well inn, Jean followed the streets and left Mummet. While he had gotten some help from Cirrus, Alcaro had still died from Jin's own magic, so he had no reason to feel guilty or ashamed about the completion of his mission. Chapter 39. Kinzelo's misunderstanding. In the meantime, the youngest division was on their own mission. And contrary to the expectations of all members of the intermediate class, the members of Jin's faction were faring quite well against the orcs. They had already subjugated 17 of the 25 orcs they were assigned to defeat. This makes 18. At this rate, we might all actually return alive with no casualties. Scott and Tymont extracted their swords from the orc's corpse. Let's return safely and destroy all of those bastards' pride and ego. I was worried we'd ruin the young master's reputation, but if this goes on, it might be the opposite instead. There are still 7 orcs left. We mustn't let down our guards until we subjugate them all. While Mesa burst their little bubble of excitement, she was actually smiling deep inside. It's almost as if we were blessed by the gods. No, it might be young Master Jean who was blessed by the gods, and his good fortune rubbed off on us as well. All the members of Jin's division were of the same opinion. Normally, orcs moved in groups. However, for some reason, these orcs were appearing one at a time as if they were asking to be killed. Moreover, they were never in a hurry, and attacked the cadets sluggishly. No wonder they thought they were extremely lucky. Resume scouting the area. Make sure you stay vigilant. Everyone. The Jean division cut and stored the dead orc's ear in a bag and returned to their respective positions in the formation. As they moved through the forest, one man observed the cadets from behind, hidden in the dense, tall grass. Once they defeat the remaining 7 orcs, I can finally go back home as well. The man wearing a bored and dull face was Murakan. Mesa thought that the god's blessing was protecting them, but it was in fact the black dragon Murakan who was acting as their guardian angel. Murakan had arrived here in the unprotected zone of the Kurano dukedom before the Jean division and had assembled the orcs. Afterwards, he told them as such, "Listen carefully, you stinking pigs. I won't say this twice. From today onwards, you all need to move around alone. If I see a single one of you trying to build a group and gather other orcs, I will personally annihilate you. Do you understand?" Lowly orcs couldn't go against the orders of the great black dragon. Moreover, he had spoken to them in dragon tongue, the language that represented the authority of the dragons. Dominating the minds of low-class monsters with dragon tongue was as easy as breathing to Muraken. He was the only reason the Gene division could safely defeat the orcs one by one so far. Needless to say, the cadets had no idea about this truth. Still, it seems like Gene, that kid, he's planning on continuously sending me on these trivial missions. Geez, do you think being the promised contractor of 1,000 years makes you the boss of me? Fuck, it does. Damn it. That son of a... The members of the Gene division managed to subjugate the remaining 7 orcs the next day in the middle of the night. We did it. We really made it alive. This time around, even Mesa couldn't hide her joy and glee, and cheered along with her teammates. They had completed the mission one day earlier than what they had expected. We'll take turns resting and keeping watch until the afternoon. Once everyone has gotten some sleep, we're returning to the Garden of Swords. We switch the members on night watch duty every 45 minutes. The one on food duty will prepare breakfast. And so began their late-night/early morning camp. Muraken also lied down amongst the tall grass near the campsite. He was planning on spending time until afternoon came by reading the erotic magazines he had brought with him. As he read the magazines, his annoyance and irritation slowly disappeared. He hadn't been able to spend time reading them until now, as he had to keep an eye on the human brats. Kids who weren't even involved in his destiny. Once we're back, I'm definitely telling the kid to get me several limited edition magazines in return for this favor. Thinking of it like that, helping these brats on their mission is quite profitable for me as well. Flop. Muraken suddenly closed the magazine he was reading and sighed. He could sense a dangerous presence in the distance slowly approaching the campsite where the Gene division was staying. He didn't know who this presence belonged to or what their objective was, but Muraken was certain about 2 things. 1, the individual was slowly approaching the cadets' campsite, and 2, the individual had considerable power. Seems like fate isn't on our side. At this rate, the effort I put in this mission won't match the profit I'll make. Where did this bastard suddenly pop out of? TSK. Muraken clicked his tongue bitterly and stood up. Fortunately, the cadets of the Gene division were only at the 3-star level. Thus, Muraken could erect a large barrier around the campsite, and the kids wouldn't be able to differentiate the darkness of the night from the shadowy hemisphere protecting them. SSSSSSSSSSSS. A handful of shadows gathered in both of his palms. This was on a completely different scale compared to the demonstration he had done in the underground chamber of the Storm Castle. As Muraken lived alongside Gene on the surface of the continent, he was slowly breathing in some of the abundant shadows around him on a daily basis. Therefore, he had regained some of his strength from the era when he was known as the Black Dragon that shook the world. As Muraken covered the campsite in a barrier of spiritual energy, Bellup, who was on night watch duty, tilted his head in confusion. He felt like his surroundings had suddenly gotten darker than before. However, he didn't think much of it. The boy merely believed they were deeper into the night and didn't notice the barrier. As a gust of heavy wind shook the trees, Muraken covered his entire body in spiritual energy as well. Soon, what emerged from his original position was an enormous black dragon. It was Muraken's original form. Swoosh! His gigantic pair of wings covered the moon. All the monsters, alongside the animals and other living creatures in the area, began to tremble in instinctive fear and subconscious terror. Unsurprisingly, the powerful entity that was approaching the campsite also stopped in its tracks. It had detected Muraken. Who dares to leak their energy in my presence without my permission? Muraken flew into the sky and covered the moon and stars. The black dragon blocking the moonlight exuded a dangerous air that no one would doubt it of being an agent of the gods. However, there was no answer. Unfortunately, Muraken wasn't as merciful as usual when in his original form. Swoosh! Swoosh! With each flap of a wing, a dark storm swept through the area. A storm of shadows. As the tempest raged in the forest, it snapped. Large trees like twigs and swirled around the source of this spiritual energy. Only then did the individual lying down in the distance finally stand up to reveal themselves. Having verified the response from this entity, Murakan stopped flapping his wings. Its gigantic body that could be compared to a fortress was covered in rocks. Beneath the large helmet molded with ancient magic were two bright red eyes, glaring at the dragon. Finally, there was an immense spear and shield in both of its hands. It was a being called a cemetery giant. Oh, I see. It wasn't a living being, but rather an outdated relic from the old ages. Murakan was surprised by the appearance of this cemetery giant. The cemetery giants had already disappeared without a trace around 2,000 years ago. They were tasked with protecting the graves of the deceased gods, but the dragon race had exterminated them. In other words, this giant wasn't supposed to exist in modern times anymore, let alone appear before Murakan. As the dragon calmly landed on the ground, the cemetery giant raised its shield. For a short while, Murakan looked down at his enemy and felt something was wrong with this situation. But I'm not pleased to see you. Karararrar. The cemetery giant let out a disgusting groan and lowered its stance. Murakan tightened his scales as he recalled the ancient war between both races. He was preparing to release his breath. While it would leave behind traces, he had to finish this fight as quickly as possible. Murakan opened his jaw and darkness gathered in a dangerous sphere. After a few seconds, he had amassed enough spiritual energy to completely raise an entire mountain range to the ground. Sighing. As he fired his breath, the surrounding area was suddenly submerged in total darkness. The cemetery giant lowered one leg and hid its body behind its shield, but it couldn't withstand Murakan's strength. Goo! All it could do was yell one last groan upon death's door, just as the rest of the cemetery giants had done 2,000 years ago when facing the dragons. Crumble. As it breathed its last, the cemetery giant fell apart into small pieces, and a rain of rubble came down where it was previously standing. Huff, huff. After the end of the battle, Murakan returned to his human form and panted intensely. His entire body felt like it was breaking apart as he had used too much power for the first time in a long period. There's no way one cemetery giant just randomly survived the war until today and stayed undetected. Fuck. I'm sure that the Zipfels are somehow related to this incident. What on earth is happening around the world right now? After pondering for a short moment, Murakan shook his head. For now, I shouldn't tell Jean about this. No matter what happens, I just need to protect him. As long as the kid grows steadily for another 10 years, he'll be strong enough to face the Zipfels. The next day, in Bouvard Gaston's fragmented workshop's underground room, Bouvard was walking in circles and dragging his fat body around. He was anxious enough that he couldn't stop biting on his thumbnail. Creak. One man entered the room. With a slick coat and a fierce gaze, this stern individual was Vishikal Ivliano. He was the vice leader of the revolutionary group, Kinzalo. Lord Vishikal. A problem has occurred. My work of art. My masterful work of art was. I've already been told about it. The cemetery giant was destroyed last night. Wasn't it? Indeed. Ugh. Just who would do such an atrocious act? How dare they treat my artwork in such a way? Are they looking down on the soul of an artisan? Vishikal sighed deeply. In order to achieve Kinzalo's grand objective, this moron who preached about the soul of an artisan was indispensable, and Vishikal found that truth to be unfortunate. Bouvard, your artisan's soul isn't what's important right now. The cemetery giant was destroyed by a dragon last night. A dragon? That's right. In fact, it was a dragon that controls shadows. I confirmed it with my own eyes before coming here. Vishikal was extremely anxious and on edge that he was about to go crazy. Kinzalo had prepared their grand master plan since 500 years ago. They were finally putting their plan in action, but this incident had suddenly hindered them. Moreover, most active dragons these days were working for the Zipfels. Bouvard stopped making a fuss and stared at Vishikal silently. That can't be. Are you saying the dragons have already noticed our movements and plans? Not only that, it was a shadow dragon. Nothing certain for now, but that was definitely a warning from them. I'll try to have a meeting with the Zipfels sometime soon. In the meantime, make sure you keep an eye on everything that happens in this area. I'll lend you some useful men to work with. Understood. Ugh. I can't believe this. Speaking of which, Lord Vishikal, have you had breakfast yet? I'd like to have a sweet potato croquette. Vishikal endured the boiling rage inside him and barely answered back. Sure. I'll go buy some. So let's eat together. Hee, that sounds good. I'd like some fresh milk as well. He also vowed to himself that he'd murder this sickening fatass with his own hands one day. Chapter 40. Dominating the intermediate class, Jean and the youngest division's successful return from their respective missions were the hottest topics within the intermediate class. Nobody had predicted this outcome. Most people believed that while some members of the youngest division would return alive, many of them would perish during the mission. However, Jean was the biggest surprise. He had to assassinate the master of the Hidden Palace's lover in Mummet, and no one thought it was achievable. They all thought that Jean would return without completing the mission. No one in the world wants to die at the tender age of 15. Kuhahaha. The flag-bearers who assigned you this mission must be taken aback. I bet they're fuming right now. Even Zed was surprised by the success of the mission. He praised Jean in front of the other cadets several times and showed his satisfaction and delight. Every time it happened, the Tana twins shrank back in fear, and the other cadets accepted that Jean had become the new trend of the intermediate class. Yes, the new trend. The members of the youngest division were the target of envy from the others. More and more cadets were hoping to join the youngest division instead of Mew or the Tana twins factions. But there was one group of cadets who were grinding their teeth in irritation as they watched this new trend. From what I've heard, some random magician happened to attack the inn where the assassination target was residing on the same day. The damned young Master Jean has such good luck. What an unfair world. Not only was he born a run candle, he's also blessed with good fortune. Some of us are only intermediate class cadets even though we used up all the luck in our lives. TCH. They were the cadets from Mew and Anne's faction, including Kajin Ramello, sitting on the ground and complaining together. Previously, they were at the top of the food chain in this jungle-like intermediate class, but recently, their authority and power had taken a nosedive. The lowly cadets who once used to be wary of them were now sucking up to the youngest division, and that annoyed them to death. If young Master Jean or the other brats were exceptionally strong, I'd accept this outcome. But young Master Jean is only a 4-star knight, and the others are 3 stars. Kajin, are we seriously letting them do as they please? Kajin smiled bitterly and shook his head. What would happen to us if we attempted something? He may be irritating, but young Master Jean is still a pure-blooded run candle. There's nothing we can do until Ladies Mew and then give us ord. Kajin suddenly stopped talking. He noticed that Jean, who was sitting on the other side of the training ground, was suddenly approaching them. Why is he? Did he hear us? He didn't. It's impossible with this distance. Unfortunately, I heard everything, my friends. Jean shrugged and spoke as he joined the group. Kajin and the others' expressions visibly darkened. Despite his shock and surprise, Kajin changed his attitude and let out a soft chuckle. My apologies, young Master Jean. Lowly weaklings like us are only able to rival your mighty strength by talking behind your back like this. Please forgive us for this blunder. Kajin's sarcastic and arrogant tone surprised his own associates. Even the other cadets in the area who were having their own conversations stopped talking and turned to them, eyes wide open. But the boy in question didn't think much of Kajin's words. I mean, there's nothing to forgive. I'm not a flag-bearer yet, so strictly speaking, it's not up to me. You may say that, but can't you use your authority as a run candle to have a lowly cadet like me be whipped as punishment? I shall humbly accept any punishment you are to give me. The situation had turned sour, but Kajin hadn't forgotten that Mew and Anne, who were backing him, had far more authority than Jean. Why do you believe that I'd do such a thing? Because of my insolent and disrespectful attitude. The other cadets began to gather around them, whispering to each other. Class had ended for the day already, so Zed and the assistant instructors had already left. Hey, Kajin, watch your tongue when talking to the young master. Are you crazy? He's already overlooked your offense. Don't push your luck. You guys are the ones who shouldn't push their luck. I'm the one who'll get punished, not you bastards. Geez, all of you have grown so much in such a short while. You couldn't even look me in the eyes until not long ago. Should I consider you guys as part of young Master Jin's faction now? Kajin glared at the spectators and they avoided his gaze. He was the apex predator of the intermediate class until Jin arrived. He was one of the most skilled 5-star knights in the class and had the support of Mew and Runcandle. Even the Tana twins couldn't carelessly talk to Kajin. What a distasteful sight, Kajin. Yes, I bet it must be distasteful to you, young master. But I find it equally unpleasant to watch others respect you for a mission you didn't accomplish with your own strength. It's only because you're a pure-blooded Runcandle that they're wagging their tails at you. This crazy bastard. Who do you think you're talking to? Schling. The onlooking Mesa stepped forward and unsheathed her sword. She was about to leap at Kajin to murder him, but Jin raised his hand and stopped her. Young master, I must kill that insolent bastard today. Even if I die trying, I will definitely cut off an arm at the very least. Enough. Mesa hesitated for a moment before putting away her blade. It seems you've misunderstood me, Kajin. When I said it was a distasteful sight, I wasn't talking about your sarcastic comments to the others or your insolent attitude towards me. Ha! Then what is it that you found so distasteful, young master? As a 5-star knight, you are one of, if not the most skilled cadet in the intermediate class. You may even be stronger than me. So why do you resort to simple badmouthing behind my back? Schling. This time, Jin unsheathed his sword and aimed it at Kajin. You could just slander me right in my face. Was it because you weren't courageous enough to face me in a fight? I'm pretty certain I said anyone could attack me if they wanted to on my first day here. Kajin raised his head and silently stared at Jin's eyes. Are you certain about this? Indeed. Stand up and ready your sword. Jin took a few steps back and prepared his stance. Kajin only stared dumbfounded, and the other cadets couldn't hide their shock and tension. Just why was young Master Jin doing this? Everyone was asking the same question. While Jin was strong, they all believed that he was still lacking compared to Kajin and that he could never win against the 5-star knight. No need to go easy on me. Let's take this seriously. That sounds like you want me to go all out and even use aura. Kajin stood up and unsheathed his own sword. Correct. You will regret this, young master. Don't think that you'll be able to take me by surprise and cut my arm off so easily like last time. You will need to go all out in order to even dream of facing me. If I were to go all out, you would never be able to win against me, even in 1,000 years. What an empty bluff. Clang. Kajin was the one to make the first move. He shortened the distance between them in an instant and made use of his superior build to overpower his opponent in a frontal attack. Each sharp swing created deep reverberations which made Jin stagger. His attacks are all so heavy. Kajin Ramello, 24 years old, 5-star knight. He was only an intermediate cadet in the Runcandle clan, but in the outside world, he was strong enough that every group and organization around the world would try to recruit him. Even if he left the clan right now, he could easily find a job as a knight and be revered by the public as a respected warrior. Amongst all the people Jin had faced in a duel of swordsmanship, Kajin was the strongest opponent so far, even if you included Jin's adversaries from his past life. But compared to the people I'll be fighting from here on out, this is nothing. Clang, clang. As the battle continued, Jin kept retreating as Kajin chased him like a predator. One could easily notice the overflowing malice in Kajin's eyes as he swung his sword. Cook, are you giving up already? Do you finally have a grasp of reality now? You aren't skilled enough to pick a fight with me, young master. Kajin instantly changed his stance and grabbed his sword with both hands. He then enveloped it with aura and swung it with all his might. It was as if he were wielding a warhammer instead of a sword. He had even tilted his sword to strike with the flat of his blade. He was trying to destroy Jin's guard. Boom! Even though Jin parried the blow, an explosion resonated in the area, and Jin barely managed to hold onto his sword. However, his posture was disrupted. It was the same for Kajin, but that was his intention from the start. Kajin had swung with all his might, expecting to ruin his stance. Making use of the recoil from his extreme swing, Kajin roundhouse kicked his opponent in the thigh. The shin guards he was wearing amplified the total force and damage. Jin ground his teeth as his thigh throbbed in agony. He didn't have the time to groan out loud. Kajin had already regained his balance and was making a flurry of attacks. Slit. Kajin's blade grazed Jin's forehead, cutting off some of his front hair. Had Jin not leaned his head backwards, his brain would be visible to everyone by now. At that moment, Taimont stood up in a hurry. He was planning on stopping the fight as he feared for the young master's life. However, Mesa stopped him. "Do you think the young master will lose?" The convinced Taimont scratched the back of his head awkwardly and sat back down. By now, all the spectating cadets believed the battle was completely one-sided. Compared to the breathless Jin, Kajin was still swiftly swinging his sword covered in powerful and glaring aura. However, Jin wasn't retreating out of fear. He was trying to concentrate his mind on a certain sensation. Just like when I got hit by Haytona's steel marble, I can slowly start seeing the trajectories of Kajin's attacks. The strange sensation he had felt when he trained with the clear stones with his brothers. There are an infinite number of paths a single blade can take when gliding through the air. But for a 5-star knight, there are only so many trajectories they can take with their level of skill. That was especially the case for opponents like Kajin, who was letting rage control his mind and body. Thus, Jin decided to end the fight with the next 3 moves. He had to provoke Kajin even more to make him use his hidden skills and techniques in case there were any. "I've gotten a good grasp of your attacks now. You won't be able to win against me. I see that you'll continue bluffing to the end, young master." Jin only had to dodge the attacks 2 more times. He believed that Kajin was going to adhere to the attack patterns he had used so far. There was no need to change plans or tactics when it had been useful so far. In fact, now that Jin had provoked him by saying he could read Kajin's moves, the 5-star knight was never going to change his approach due to his fury and arrogance. But if Jin avoided Kajin's attacks perfectly 2 more times, Kajin would have to make a choice. Either he changed tactics with a calm mind, or he used his most powerful attack that Jin wouldn't be able to evade or block even if he saw it coming. And needless to say, the fight progressed just as Jin had predicted. One left swing followed by an irregular upward slash. Jin didn't parry those attacks and dodged them perfectly. He spread his feet apart and crouched to avoid the first move, and sidestepped in advance to dodge the second one. During this short exchange, Kajin's mind was in turmoil. He admitted that Jin could have evaded the first left swing. But the boy had dodged the unpredictable upward swing even before Kajin had begun to raise his sword. TCH. Thus, Kajin released all the aura he had to power up his third attack. Whether Jin had evaded his attacks by reading his moves or through pure coincidence, the boy wouldn't be able to dodge. This one. The human body wasn't as free and flexible as water. And in the slight chance that Jin did manage to avoid it, his stance would be completely ruined, creating a great opening for Kajin to take advantage of. Therefore, Kajin decided to release a large amount of aura so powerful that number 4-star knight could ever defend from. This is the end. But Kajin couldn't finish his sentence. Something unexpected had occurred. Jin didn't try to evade the powerful attack. Instead, he covered his own sword with aura as well and swung it with all his might, receiving the attack head-on. Boom! When the 2 blades met each other, the one who was pushed back was, surprisingly, Kajin. The 5-star knight had lost to the 4-star. He had been pushed back in a battle of strength. Until seconds ago, he had been overpowering Jin with his bigger build, but Kajin had been overwhelmed this time around. His eyes trembled as he couldn't hide his shock. The aura covering Bradamanti had a color and glint that was far deeper than that of a 4-star knight. I also thought it would take me a few more years to reach 5-star. Swoosh! Jin made use of Kajin's disarray and bolted before him. Anyone would be in a predicament when facing an opponent who was far stronger than what they had initially expected. Kajin finally realized he had let his guard down when Bradamanti's blade reached his neck. And so, the victor was decided. "Did you trick me? To think you were 5-star already? Haha." Kajin spoke in a disheartened voice as his sword fell to the ground. No, you just don't know me well enough. I never fight a battle where I'm not confident of winning. What's going on here? Two individuals came running belatedly to the training grounds. They were the Tana twins, who had heard the news of this fight moments ago. The twins couldn't hide their astonishment as they saw the two figures standing at the center of the crowd. He defeated Kajin? The youngest actually beat him? Jin turned around and sheathed his sword. As he passed by his older brothers with a slow pace, he calmly said, "Nothing important." The twins felt chills run down their spines and got goosebumps from their little brother's words. Translator's section. So, nice fight, right? Also, anyone else confused on how Kajin got his arm back? The author didn't give any details, but he did somehow get it back. But after the PR and I check back on the older chapters, in chapter 20 they say, as long as the injuries aren't fatal, such as amputated limbs or damaged vital organs, the medical team can fully heal the victim in an instant. So, we assume that the medical team just can't heal amputations in an instant. In other words, it's possible that they reattached it properly, but it just took longer than an instant. Author, please be more clear with things like this XDDD anyways. I'll see you all on Wednesday.